So we are back in session. I have a note here that I didn't speak clearly enough about why we're going into executive session, so I'm going to reread the statement. So the Bothell City Council will now move into executive session, which we already did, to discuss issues related to the Wayne Golf Course potential purchase investigation. The purpose of the executive session will be to discuss complaints against the council members and to discuss matters of potential litigation with the legal counsel representing the city. And the executive session was supposed to last approximately 30 minutes, which we all know was not true, 49 minutes or so now that we're back. And council has now resumed the meeting. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Councilmember Evans.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I would like to move that we waive the attorney-client privilege in relation to the Wayne Golf Course investigation.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion by Councilmember Evans and a second by Councilmember Agnew. Is there any discussion?
Mayor.
Deputy Mayor. 1 second. Mr. Beck.
Want to clarify that that's the investigative report that you're waiving the privilege with regard
Correct.
to?
So it's investigative report.
Right.
That's your understanding as well? Okay.
That was my question.
Okay.
So,
Okay. So any discussion on the motion? All right. Seeing none, if everybody could place their vote. And the clerk display. Perfect. So it passes unanimously. So the report is now public. We will provide copies. I don't know if we actually have copies tonight if we don't. But we will find a way that we can release copies to the public and to media, obviously, of what is in content here. I don't know if anybody wants to speak to the matter of the report. Councilmember Evans.
I would just like, if possible, if the city manager could clarify how people get this report. Is it going to be on our website? What are the options for the public to see this information?
now that the council has made that decision, I'm inclined to post the report on the city's website so that it's easily accessible for those who choose to review it. We'll also have hard copies available at various locations, but the easiest access to the report will be on our website.
So, and will that be on the website tomorrow?
As quickly as we can put it on the website, yes. I'm not certain at what time it'll be on the website tomorrow, but confident it'll be on the website tomorrow.
For sure, hard copies will be available first thing in the morning.
Within a reasonable time frame, yes.
Yes, okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Sandberg.
So in the report, our attorney was able to look at the REPSA, and I'm sorry, I think it's a real estate purchase and sale agreement, was able to review it, but did not, was not able to provide any details in the report. And in his explanation, he says that because the conservation easement does not provide any particular mechanism for acquiring information necessary to verify the conditions in Section 17, we still don't have a copy of that REPSA. And he said that that it was not his role to have it released to the city, that was not within his mandate of the investigation. But I would like to remind the council that we did take a vote asking city staff to request that REPSA agreement so that we could verify that the conditions of the easement were met. And so I would like to respectfully ask that the city manager still make that request, because even though it was not, it's not been made public or received through the results of this report, we still did direct the staff to do that. And I feel that that the right to validate the conditions of the easement, that right is implied in that document, and so we should be able to receive that.
Staff is still planning on making that request now that the investigation is completed. We feel that it's the appropriate time to make that request
Okay.
based on the council's previous direction.
Any other comments?
Yeah, so people are, since we've said we've released it and we haven't actually said what it is, Mr. Eglett concludes that the legal conclusion reached is that based on the data gathered in review, state law and city strictures on conflict of interest and ethics have not been violated. And I would say that certain, the strictures and the rules have not been violated, but what has transpired has resulted in a loss of public trust, and we have a lot of work to do to regain that. And I think even if there weren't specific laws violated, there were mistakes made in that process that I hope we don't repeat again. I was not in that executive session because I wasn't on council yet, but I specifically asked here on the dais when people were remembering what happened in that executive session a year and a half ago. Were council members provided the 1996 conservation easement that governed that property? And no one up here said that they remembered. The notes here, the report says there's no recollection of that conservation easement being provided, and I think that's very serious. I think that the failure to inform council members of very germane documents to the sale of that property is serious. If the council is not fully informed, how can they expect to make a complete and fully informed decision? And the other thing that I specifically asked was, were you advised that there was value in just making an offer in response to the back nine? And I asked that question, and everybody said no, they did not. They do not remember being asked that question or discussing that. The reason why I asked that was because when we had an executive session regarding the offer on the front nine, that legal opinion was given to us, that there was value in just making an offer on the front nine.
So, Mr. Mayor, I'd make a point of order that I don't believe we have waived executive session privilege as to that conference. I wasn't part of that executive session, but I don't think executive session privilege has been waived.
Was that an executive session conversation?
It was an executive session conversation. So by my saying that, it just further proves my point that there is this feeling, this unspoken rule that if something is uttered in executive session, it doesn't leave the room. So my saying that just uttering that piece of advice, that there is value in just making an offer, that doesn't affect the city's ability to make an offer on a property, doesn't jeopardize any future negotiations. So what I've heard from previous council members is that at the November 2013 meeting, they felt as though when they left that meeting, they couldn't say anything on the dais because it was a topic of executive session. And now when I say something that happened in executive session, you're telling me that I'm violating that. So it is a reasonable argument for council members who were present in that executive session to have left feeling that they couldn't talk about it, compounded by the fact that they were not given the conservation easement and they were not advised that there was value in just making the offer in the first place. And there is value in just making the offer making an offer when you reach Section 17. So maybe there haven't been any laws broken, and maybe you might want to charge me with breaking executive session privilege by what I just said, which would be so ironic. I would welcome that. But it doesn't, nothing might be legal, but it sure doesn't feel right.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you. Councilmember Lamb. Everybody could restrain themselves, please. Thank you. Councilmember Lamb.
Thank you. So I appreciate the work that was done on this report, and I appreciate the fact that council has agreed unanimously to make this report public. I think having a clear understanding of the chain of events, having a clear understanding of what happened from beginning to end will be a part of bringing the public into a full understanding, which I think is very, very important. I do believe that in the future, as a city council, and I was the mayor at the time that we had this executive session, when we have a right of property or a conservation easement presented to us, I think it should be made public. And that's something that, as we look forward to this in the days ahead, I think that we should make that change, because I think that would have made a difference in the perception around this event, and I think that's an important development. I do think that at the core of this issue is kind of what happens to Wayne Golf Course at this point, and I think that that's a time that our community needs to come together and needs to try to work forward towards a positive goal. One of the challenges that we face in a lot of conservation issues in our city, and we face this with the North Creek Forest as well, is resources. So I think if we, as a city, look forward and look in a positive direction towards trying to achieve conservation goals, I think that'll be a good thing. And I think that'll be a good thing that'll come out of this process that has torn a lot of people apart and divided a lot of people in our community. So I think people in our community care a lot about their city. I think they care a lot about how it's developing. I think they care a lot about the open spaces in our city. And I think, I've been on this council for 12 years, and we've seen a lot of very, very good progress in the city of Bothell. I think we also want to have an opportunity in our city to bring everybody into the conversation. And I think you can learn things from experiences. And one of the things that I believe in and that I've learned from this experience is that we should have a better process around disclosing actions or inactions in executive session, both before executive sessions and after executive sessions. And I think that'll be a good thing for our community moving forward. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you. Others, comments? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. As Councilmember Lamb mentioned, that there's lessons learned here, and there may have been statements in a later executive session that were made because of a lesson learned from the November 2013 executive session. So possibly that's why something was heard then and not before. There's also a lot of information in this report, and comments about not having the easement in the room may not be true. The staff member that was presenting that night is a very thorough individual, had lots of paperwork with her that night, probably the conservation easement, very thick document. So to say that it wasn't there is not necessarily truthful. When you get the report, you'll see the comments from the investigating attorney in here. There's a lot of things in here that people can take and say their piece, but this is the investigation, and I encourage everybody to read it objectively. This is an individual who's highly respected that did this report and did a very good job. I think that we've all learned lessons, as Councilmember Lamb has said, and the important thing now is, as with anything, is to learn, heal from it, move forward, and become a better community as a result. So that's the part that I'm looking forward to right now.
Other comments? Councilmember Agnew or Ram? Councilmember Evans?
Well, I would just like to say I was in the executive session in November of 2013. We've discussed from this dais the things that went on in that meeting. I didn't feel that I couldn't walk out of that meeting and not say anything. There wasn't anything to say. What was said in that meeting was, we would love to have this property and a lot of other properties that are in our PROSAP, our priorities and projects and that type of thing, but there isn't funding for that. It wasn't that there wasn't a desire, there wasn't funding. So had I thought, or someone on the council had thought, we could raise X million dollars to buy that property, there's no reason why we couldn't have come out of that meeting and said, this is our number one priority. Although we have several priorities in the city, we're going to move this one up on the list, and we're going to put it above other things. But we didn't have the funding not only to buy this property, but to fund many of the priorities that we had. So just wanted to clarify that a little bit based on some of the previous comments. And I know when Councilmember Sandberg stated the results of the investigation that there were a lot of very unhappy people apparently. And all I would encourage or would ask you to do is please read the document so that you've got that information to base your decision on. Then you can agree or disagree whatever you want. But to inform yourselves of what's in there and what the investigation entailed, what the timeline and the framework was, it will be helpful to you folks. We have done that. We see areas where, as a council, we can make some changes. We're more than willing to do that. So I just would encourage the public to look at that document and then, go from there and see where we go. Hopefully in the future we can move forward with not only this priority, but many other priorities in the city. We certainly have a lot of them.
Great. Councilmember Ram.
So not to counter you on purpose, but I have great respect for you. But I was also in the executive session, and what I do professionally is I try to recover rivers and creeks, and the Sammamish River is in great need of our help. There are resources regionally that if I could come out here and beg and plead it, I have sense that I knew I could. I have begged and pleaded every single person, every single avenue that I'm aware of to try to get money for this golf course, to purchase the golf course for the public. So I don't feel like I was informed with the ability to. Did you have something to say?
Who are you?
No, I'm talking to the city manager.
No,
I
don't think I heard my microphone.
That I really wish we had the opportunity to have purchased this property for the public before this whole thing basically got off the tracks. I think we could have. I think we could have probably worked with the property owner if they knew we were sincere and honest, or not honest, sorry. They knew we were sincere and serious about getting the money from regional sources. So that was one thing. And then the other thing I wanted to bring up is that I found out something rather not startling, but shocking, is that we have in our codes ethics codes. And the two quotes that I really honed in on, because ethics codes are about, being good people and trying to, we've got a lot of different things here, offering, using a city position for private gain, losing complete impartiality, adversely affecting the confidence of the public and the integrity of the city. These are the things that are in our ethics code. And the conclusion from the city, from the attorney that we hired to do this investigation, one of them says, this section is aspirational rather than stating an objectively enforceable definition of conduct constituting impropriety. His other comment is on a different piece of the ethics code that we have locally that we apply to our staff. He says it's vague, precluding objective application. So it's not that it's but so the lens that this report is written on is legal, okay? And so I know a lot of people are upset not because of their lawyers and they see a legal issue. They feel like this is wrong, and I hope we can rectify that as soon as possible. And I think the quickest route to that is to try to get this property for the public. So that's it.
Okay, Councilmember Agnew.
I think this has been a learning experience for us all. I think Councilmember Evans said that we didn't have the funding, and we didn't have the funding at that point in time, although I wasn't at that executive session. But it seems like a grassroots organization came up with funding. They came up with a lot of funding. I wish we would have known that. I wish we would have known that was available to us. I still think that we should pursue the purchase of the back nine and the front nine of the Wayne Golf Course. I thank the City of Bothell, Forterra, and the buyers and the sellers of the Wayne Golf Course need to get together with One Bothell and sit down and have some legitimate conversation. That's my personal feeling.
Great, thank you. So in conclusion, I do hope that everybody has the opportunity to see the report. I'm happy that it's here, and we will post it on the website for everybody tomorrow. It will clearly talk about the timeline of which all this went down in November 2013. We as a council had the opportunity to consider the first right of offer on the back nine, and nobody made the decision to move forward. So about 45 days later, it's discussed in here, the sellers of the golf course approached me as well as 15 other developers. So 16 different development companies were approached for the opportunity to buy the back nine. About 6 months after that conversation in November is when we got into contract of May 30th, 2014. And so it was private property that was on the market. I know it's frustrating, and I certainly heard people's questions about these, the goings-on with the Wayne Golf Course. The report will explain how there has been no legal violation, no ethical violation. So I do understand people's concern about the golf course. If you could all just listen to the statements, I appreciate it. So I understand and respect the citizens have had questions about the Wayne Golf properties, and the independent report issued today provides a detailed history of the matters that concludes that I and my colleagues on the City Council have conducted themselves in accordance with the laws and rules that govern the Council. I understand that the questions were raised, and I appreciate the work done by the independent council to address them. So I've actually lived in the Wayneta Valley, 1 mile from the golf course, for 41 years of my life, and treasured that valley as a unique community. I'm willing to meet with any willing purchasers who want to acquire the property for conservation. If no group surfaces, I'm committed to creating a neighborhood that would honor the environment by enhancing buffers to natural vegetation and preserve the majority of the property in open space and create a western access to Blythe Park with a community bike and pedestrian trail. I'm thankful for overwhelming support that I've received from many friends and family and numerous citizens in and around the City of Bothell. So in conclusion, I sincerely hope that we as a council and community can find a way to move forward in a manner of mutual respect, and we can disagree about ideas, but trying to personally attack or destroy those we disagree with, we need to avoid that, and we need to avoid rushes to judgment as well. So on this matter, we'll provide this report to citizens tomorrow midday or at some point by day's end, so everybody can have an opportunity to read it. So we are at the conclusion of this matter for this evening. We'll jump to our projected agenda. Does anybody have any changes they'd like to make on tonight? Actually, meeting agenda for tonight. Any changes to tonight's meeting agenda? How about projected agenda? Councilmember Rayam.
Sorry, I didn't raise my finger fast enough about tonight's agenda.
Okay, tonight
we can go back. I think we need to have time to the planning, comprehensive plan item. Item number, was that 9?
How much time would you like?
It's down for 1 hour. I'd say at least an hour and a half.
Agreeable? Yep. Okay, so an hour and a half. Any other changes? Was that on that matter? No. Councilmember Sandberg?
For the projected agenda?
Yep.
Are we still on the agenda? Or
Well, we were on tonight's agenda. Nobody lifted a finger or an eyebrow. So we can go
I was
back
trying
to
to jump in right after.
All right, meeting agenda.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor.
The question was, that was a total of an hour and a half or adding an hour and a half?
Yeah, to make the total an hour and a half instead of just 1 hour.
Okay. We'll probably, I think we're probably going to need to add some time to AB 15-053, probably another 20 minutes.
So 30 minutes. I'm agreeing to that. Everybody else? Great. So anything else on tonight's agenda?
Mr. Mayor, with that, I'd make a motion that we extend to 10:30.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So passes unanimously. We'll extend to 10:30 this evening. Okay, so projected agenda. Any changes?
I would like to add to next week's meeting a continued discussion on the RFA and the fire services study that we're receiving tonight. We received it late, And so I'd like to have the opportunity next week to continue discussion on that if possible. And if we don't need it, then we don't have to. Okay. So I'm hearing we need it. So I would like to add that discussion to the agenda for next week.
So we're already at 3 hours, so we would need to extend the meeting as well. How much time do you think we would need for that RFA discussion?
Probably another 30 minutes to 45 minutes. The reason why I say that is on May 19th, I was going to suggest that we discuss again on May 19th, but the agenda item is listed as council discussion and decision regarding the Regional Fire Authority.
/ decision, sure, if we're able to get to one, that's right. Doesn't require there's a decision made, but it leaves room for it if need be. So I'm certainly in favor of adding 30 minutes to next meeting on May 12th, which would then extend our meeting out.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
So, City Manager, do you believe that we are anticipated to make a decision on the 19th, or are there other parties at work on other sides of the RFA that would require that, or no?
Well, I think you've heard from the representatives on the RFA that they would like to receive some direction to take back to the committee, and so I think that's the type of decision that the committee might be looking for. But whether or not you're able to get to that point, I'm not able to answer for you at this point.
Councilmember Agnew, Deputy Mayor Spivey, and Councilor Evans weigh in on that and just kind of let us know what.
I think we need to make a decision as soon as we can make a decision, an educated decision anyway. I think some of the other parties that are involved are getting a little impatient by Bothel's lack of progress or the perceived lack of progress. So I think the sooner we make a decision would be probably the better.
And so by decision, you mean that we would give you direction to go back and
To
say
give
this
us
is the
direction
proposal.
to go
Okay.
back to the RFA committee.
Then I would support adding time at the next meeting as well.
Any other comments? Deputy Mayor Spivey.
Yes, I will be unable to attend next week's meeting due to work.
Okay.
Thank you.
We will miss you. So we'll add 30 minutes to the next meeting for the RFA. Councilmember Sandberg.
And for the regular meeting of May 19th, I'd like to add an agenda item, and that is discussion regarding the drafting of an ethics code.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on that matter?
Well, I think that of one of the lessons that we've learned from this evening's report is that I think that we are lacking an ethics code that is more than just whatever the word was, exhortatory or suggestion or so I think it is appropriate to work on that. Other cities have ethics codes. I had the opportunity to meet with a Bellevue City Council member a couple years ago, and he explained to me how limited the state law was in regards to the ethics codes, and that's one of the reasons why Bellevue developed theirs. And so I think that there are models from other jurisdictions that we can take a look at, potentially get advice through the MRSC, and develop one for Bothell.
Does anybody have an opinion on that? So far, I see one in support. I agree with that. Two in support. Councilmember Evans.
I'm fine to discuss that. Are you looking for something from the staff on the 19th as a proposal to us?
Yeah,
or?
I think it would be helpful to know what other cities have ethics codes that go beyond what is stated in state law, and if they are able to provide some examples, I think that would be useful as well.
So I'm fine. I do think that's a discussion we need to have. I don't know if the 19th is adequate time for based on the other things the city staff is doing to bring that back to us. So I agree. Let's put it on the agenda, whether it's that date or somewhere. I want to just make sure we get the information. Staff has time to prepare the information that's going to provide a reasonable discussion on it. So I don't know. Staff, are you?
City Attorney or Bob?
Well, we certainly will do our best to provide the information, but if you note on the projected agenda, and the reason we do this is so that we can appropriately plan and make sure that we provide you sufficient information is that you'll see everything for that meeting is required to be submitted to the city clerk by tomorrow for the 19th. Now, not to say that we haven't missed those deadlines, but it is a very accelerated schedule for us to try to put together some information for you by the 19th, but we will do our best, and we can decide as we get closer to that if you have sufficient information, if we need to push that back, but we'll do our best.
Well, again, I agree in the discussion. I just want it to be a productive discussion that we have adequate information and can make some discussion. So we'll wait to see what staff comes up with, I guess, from that and go from there.
Councilmember Lamb. Oh.
I'm comfortable with moving it to farther out on the agenda. We have
9th of June.
Yeah, we have, and then July. We have nothing in our July 14th study session.
July 7th is very lean as well. So why don't we leave it to our city manager to find a date appropriate, work with staff to bring something back. Anything else on projected agenda? Nope. Okay. Moving next is our visitor section. This is an opportunity for people from the public to address the council. We have a time limit of 30 minutes. Well, 30 minutes is our total time allocated, which I imagine it may go longer tonight. That's just my guess. I have a total of 8 sign-ups. Does anybody else have sign-ups before we start this evening? No. Okay, first person I have on the sign-up sheet is Jeff O'Day. We have your address.
Hi, my name's Jeff O'Day. I've been a resident of Bothell for 13 years. I own a business in Bothell. I own commercial property in Bothell, so I'm pretty well invested in Bothell. And I'm not really happy tonight with the mayor. Over a month ago, Trish Sandberg requested a vote of the city council to request a copy of the purchase and sale agreement between the owners of Wayne and Mayor Freed to be disclosed. Green light's on. Is that better? Okay. The city council voted by majority not to, opting to wait for the ethics investigation results. Here we sit a month later, and as of tonight, still no sale agreement. You would think in creating full transparency the mayor would provide it for the good people of Bothell, but apparently the mayor still wants to hold his cards very close to his chest. The Washington Coalition for Open Government tells us the Bothell City Council violated open meeting laws by discussing the potential purchase of Wayne Golf Course during the 2013 executive session, and then allowing the right of first opportunity to purchase the back 9 property to lapse without taking the issue to a public for the council meeting. They say any time you make a decision in an executive session, you're almost always breaking the law. Where was our city attorney when this was going on? Then, as we know, a short term after that, Mayor Freed entered into a purchase agreement for the back 9 of Wayne. Tonight, we have Forterra with us, working on the purchase of the front 9 and willing to negotiate a deal with the mayor on the back 9. How utterly warped is it that our mayor violates open meeting laws to pass on the sale of Wayne, then personally purchase the back 9, in essence, taking it from the residents of the city of Bothell. Now, Forterra has to negotiate to purchase the back 9 from the mayor. And at what price? How can the mayor justify profiting from this illegal transaction? Most importantly, how shady of a deal does this look like to the Bothell citizens? If I was to look around and ask for a show of hands behind me as to who has lost confidence in Mayor Freed's actions in running the city of Bothell, I'm sure there would be many hands up in the air. And unfortunately, this casts a shadow over the entire city council, even though I know many of them are good people. That is why I call for a vote of no confidence on Mayor Freed. The public now more than ever needs to see who supports the mayor's actions and who does not. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you. completely disagree with most of what you said. So Judith Carpenter is next. I have your address for the record. Ms. Carpenter.
What I have to say is a little redundant based on what's happened in the executive session and what has come to the forefront tonight. But I'm going to read it anyway, just to emphasize. You will be presented tonight a proposal from Forterra for the financing of the Front Nine at Wayne's Golf Course. I ask the City Council to accept the terms of the Forterra proposal in order that an appraisal can be attained and get the Front Nine under contract. I urge the City Council to make a motion for the person or persons with the contract on the back nine to work with the City, Forterra, One Bothell, King County, the state, and other funding resources to save this open space. As a part of the investigation, a copy of the sale purchase agreement was to be obtained. I believe that the citizens of this city need to see that purchase sale agreement. I'm going to go through a short timeline events that led up to the sale of the back nine, which I feel is a direct violation of the Open Public Meetings Act and should invalidate the current purchase sale agreement. On 11/12/2013, the letter was sent from the Richards of notice of their intent to sell the back nine in accordance with the stipulation in the 1996 Conservation Easement Agreement. On 11/27, records show the city received the letter. On 12/16/2013, the city responded to the Richards letter stating that it had received the letter on 11/27 and set a deadline date of 1/11/2014 to respond. As part of the 12/10/2013 council meeting, Pat Parkhurst, head of the Parks Department, presented an update of the PROSAP. In that presentation, the back nine land shown as a high priority for acquisition of the current open space, as it has been for years. After that presentation, the council went into executive session. In that executive session, Pat Parkhurst presented the 11/12/2013 letter from the Richards, and a discussion ensued about the first right of purchase as outlined in the conservation easement. As heard in the April 7, 2014 City Council meeting, those who were in attendance at that session stated that the letter was discussed but no decision was made. Contrary to that statement, an email obtained through public records request from Pat Parkhurst to the other board members stated that the City Council had the first right of refusal and the decision was not to invoke it. Because of the Council's inaction and letting the 45 days expire, this is a demonstration of denial of the public's input and violated the Open Public Meetings Act. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have a second sign-up sheet for Jeff O'Day, but I'm guessing that's wrong. So next on the sign-up is David Bain. Mr. Bain, we have your address here for the record.
Okay. The arrangement Forterra has proposed buys the time needed to permanently save the Wayne land. As we can see from the public-private partnership among Help Our Woods, Friends of North Creek Forest, and the city, raising money in the allotted time is realistic. The partnership has gotten better at fundraising over the years. There are $1.5 million currently in the Senate, House, and Governor's budgets for the forest. Assuming this amount is signed into law by the governor, that money will match nearly $1 million in King County Futures grants, bringing close to $2.5 million in new funds from outside the city to complete the purchase of the forest at the stroke of a pen. Friends have been able to draw over 100 people to a single restoration event, is providing over 4,000 hours per year in volunteer labor for restoration, and has been raising tens of thousands of dollars per year to steward the forest. This experience has allowed One Bothell to hit the ground running. For comparison, Howe came to the City Council with a petition signed by 600 people. One Bothell's petition has been signed by over 2,000 people. Friends' first request to the legislature was granted at $200,000. One Bothel's request currently stands at $300,000 in the Senate and $500,000 in the House, but Senator McAuliffe announced in her newsletter that she would try to get the amount close to $1 million during the special session. The forest's first Conservation Futures Grant was also for $200,000. King County requested that One Bothell submit a request for $1.2 million. RIA 8 supported North Creek Forest with a sentence buried in a long-term planning document. RIA 8 has supported One Bothell with a letter to the state legislature requesting funding. The forest received votes approving funding from the King and Snohomish County councils. Even though none of the golf course is in Snohomish County, the Snohomish County Council and Executive's Office have been lobbying for state support for One Bothell's efforts. 2 King County Council members have written support letters. While Forterra has offered advice to Friends of North Creek Forest, it never offered to commit its own funds as it has for One Bothell. Due to its location adjacent to the Sammamish River, the golf course will be competitive for other funds the forest hasn't tapped. These include Salmon Recovery Funding Board, Puget Sound Acquisition and Restoration, Aquatic Lands Enhancement Account, National Estuary Program, Floodplains by Design, Clean Water Act Mitigation Bank, Surface Water Management, RIA 8, and other King County programs. These comparisons suggest the golf course is more fundable than the forest, and that collaboration among One Bothell, Forterra, and the city will succeed in raising funds from outside the city to protect the Wayne land in perpetuity. I hope you will agree to work with Forterra to purchase the front 9, and in the near future that the owners, purchasing group, Forterra, and the city can agree to a similar arrangement for the back 9 as well. Thank you.
Next on the sign up is Dennis Scottstad.
I'll pass, thanks.
Then the next is Lynn Anderson. Ms. Anderson.
So over the last few months, I have been trying to convey to you what it is like to sit and watch how you treat each other and how you make decisions. I have been speaking about what I believe to be a breach in your code of ethics in regard to perception and appearance. This evening, perception and appearance of honesty and integrity. At the last council meeting, a downtown property was being considered for condemnation. Some of you and the city staff believe this property to be vital to the downtown development. But because there was no funding, you added this property to the Parks and Open Spaces levy. That levy failed. The citizens of Bothell said no, just like they said no to funding a new city hall. Lo and behold, funding is now available for this property, and no levy was needed. At least $1.5 million, though the citizens of Bothell are still awaiting to be informed of the actual cost. I keep hearing we have no money for roads and parks and fire service, and you are probably going to add more of a tax burden for these items. But this city seems to be able to fund many other projects. There was barely a pause by a majority of you when the city financial officer finally identified the funding source for this property. $900,000 from a past levy and about $600,000 of real estate tax money. Poof! $1.5 million appeared within minutes to the citizens of Bothell and to all of you. This property may be important, but I would like there to be a huge pause when that amount of money becomes available. Perception and appearance of honesty and integrity are in question. Also, I watched the April 7th meeting this morning, and it was a 4-1 vote to direct the city staff to ask for the purchase and sale agreement. You asked for that on April 7th. Tonight is the first time I've heard they have not done that yet. We're about a month in from that vote. 4-1, there were 5 of you present, and they still have not followed through with the direction. It took Councilmember Sandberg, from February until April 7th to get it on the agenda, and we still haven't seen that purchase and sales agreement. I would like the council to make a motion to move forward with Forterra, the Richards, One Bothell, and the owner of the purchase and sales agreement of the back 9. Please help us to save this land.
Sandy Gwynn is our... I don't see Sandy. Oh, there she is. If others have filled out this yellow sheet, I need to get them up front.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Sandy Gwynn, Bothell resident, speaking about the Regional Fire Authority, also known as the RFA. Previously, I submitted signed petitions from Bothell residents that there should first be a vote by Bothell residents to determine if the RFA should go forward. If the majority of the Bothell residents vote yes, then place the RFA on the ballot for all the residents in the RFA area to vote. The reason for this is that the registered voters that live in the fire districts outnumber Bothell residents, and there will be little financial impact or will cost less to citizens in the fire districts. However, this is not so for Bothell residents and businesses. The residents who live in Woodinville Fire District, Fire District 10, and North Shore Fire District have a fire assessment charge on their tax bill that will be replaced with an RFA assessment if the RFA passes. This is not true for Bothell. If Bothell joins the RFA, Bothell homeowners and Bothell businesses will be the only ones in the RFA area who would pay an additional property tax plus a benefit charge, costing several $100s more per year every year. Businesses will pass on the new costs to consumers in the form of higher apartment and senior housing rents, higher food costs at grocery stores and restaurants. It was previously expressed by a city council member, if an RFA goes through and we do nothing, this city gains $9 million annually. Council needs to be honest about the cost to Bothell residents. Recently, a council member stated that it would only cost 4 cents more per thousand for fire services. This is only part of the information. He forgot to mention the dollar per thousand property tax valuation plus 50 cents annual benefit charge fee. Providing only part of the information is wrong. City Council recently, without a vote of the people, decided to build a city hall by making lease payments of $3.5 million per year. Do not do this again. This time, if Council decides to join an area-wide RFA, ask Bothell residents first if they are willing to support an RFA, and tell Bothell citizens what the true cost is to the taxpayer and what services they will not receive. If Bothell residents say yes, then and only then go out for an area-wide vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. George McHale, we have your address. Thank you, sir. If you just want to.
Hi. Hey, this microphone is aimed this way, but I kind of feel like it should be aimed this way to address the people of the city. This is kind of strange. So my name is George. Hi. This is my first meeting of this sort. I'm interested in politics. I think it's fascinating. I love what's happening with our city. It's kind of tense in here, though, right? Like, this is a little bit uncomfortable. I don't really know exactly where everyone's coming from, or if it's always this busy. Like I said, this is my first one. But I'm struck by how much good is happening in the city, and how that's not a part of the conversation tonight. I've been here since the beginning, and it seems like we just want to talk about the Wayne Golf Course, which I understand that's a big deal, and I don't really know sort of all the details. I've been trying to keep up with it, but I think I just want to stand up and emphasize, like, my friends, when I ask them, like, hey, have you heard about what's happening with the city? Most of them don't know, but I think that where the city's headed, young people should be getting more involved in politics, because we have an opportunity right now that I think is pretty exciting. I mean, when you look around what's happening in downtown, it's not really happening anywhere else. We have friends that are moving from Seattle because of the excitement that's happening here. So I think that as a community, just to humanize each other, to be here and be like, hey, we're good, right? Like, I know we got some issues that we got to talk through and figure it out, but at the end of the day, like, we should be excited. This is a great time for our city, and we'll sort through these issues. But I just want to call for unity, I guess, because as a young person who's excited to raise my kids in the city, I kind of get bummed out when I see just the bickering. And I'd love to invite my friends here and get them involved in what's happening. But this is a tough environment to walk into when it's a little bit of a downer sometimes. So, anyways, that's all.
Thank you very much. So that reaches the end of our sign-up sheet. I see somebody waving a yellow form in the back. James, if you just want to, you don't have to walk it all the way up to me. You can just do the clerk or our city attorney, James McNeil. Great. Thank you. Joe.
I'm going to keep it short and sweet, but I want to say thank you. Thank you to every citizen in our community and surrounding communities for everything they're doing to help us in Bothell, to save something that's very special, near and dear to us. And I want to thank you guys, because I know you're about to embark on something that's very special and can mean a lot to our future generations. So I'm asking you tonight to make sure that you do the right thing, work with Viterra, work with One Bothell, make sure you move forward with the Richards, and let's find a way to keep this land in perpetuity, as we set forth when we did the conservation easement, for our future generations. And let's make sure that we look at each one of these people out here, because we all have a voice, and that's where One Bothell started. We're all one community working strong together. So let's make it that way, please. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, George. Any other yellow forms? No? All right. Thank you, everybody, for your comments tonight, for coming out and being part of our government. Next on the agenda is our consent agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
I didn't see you holding that up. We'll grab one for you. Mr. Barnhart, if you'd like to come up. Yeah, if you no, that's not necessary.
James Barnhart. I've been here for about 30 years. Everybody knows me. Police department knows me. Fire department knows me. Everybody up here knows me. I don't mean to be a killjoy, but we have a cancer. Integrity and what I call corruption in this city doesn't start and end with Josh Freed. That's only the beginning. There are other members here. There are members that sit at the front table. I think that we have to cut the cancer out and get rid of it. I've been all the way to the state Supreme Court, won a unanimous decision against the city. They spent a lot of money fighting me. I went to federal court for a violation of free speech when they banned me from coming to meetings, and the police chief and other agents of the Bothell Police Department forbid me from coming in to the council meetings. I could go on and on and on with the stories of police sitting in the house across the street, listening to audio tapings of my family out front. They went after my two boys when they were 13 and 14 for fireworks and had them charged with Class C felonies. Like I said, I can go on and on and on. Now they're trying to take my house away from me by blocking permits. They tried that with a strip club owner a few years ago, ended up having to pay $350,000 to the strip club owner for falsely blocking his permits. Well, I'm going to prove that same thing with me. Next week I will be in here and I will start reading letters that I've been receiving from Joe Beck and Mike Delac of the building department for all the threats and trying to take my house and run me out of this city. You got to cut the cancer out. We need to go back to electing our mayor to a truly democratic system in this town and get rid of the good old boy system.
If you want to leave your yellow form, that would be excellent. All right, we have another one in the back. So I believe it's, is it Whitney? Maybe you can pronounce your name for me. Nergenbauer?
It's Negebauer, sorry.
Negebauer, perfect.
Yeah, my name is Whitney Negebauer, and I'm a resident of Bothell, and I'm also a director of a nonprofit called Whale Scout. And over the last year, we have held 6 restoration events all around Puget Sound, totaling about 1,000 hours. The majority of our work has been in Bothell, in North Creek Forest and Park Creek and surrounding areas. And we do this work in recognition that the salmon are the only thing that's really going to bring back a population of endangered killer whales, which currently numbers about 83. And I just wanted to come here today in support of keeping the Wayne Golf Course for conservation and to consider the proposal from Forterra. I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much. So I believe this time it brings us to the end. Thank you, James, for that. Any motion on the consent agenda?
So moved, yeah.
I didn't hear who made the motion. Councilmember Lamb, who made the second? Deputy Mayor Spivey. If everybody could place their vote. And the clerk display. How about all in favor say aye? Aye. Any opposed? No. Moving on, next on the agenda is AB 15053, a presentation to discussion with Forterra. I'm going to recuse myself from this 30-minute section and hand the gavel over to our deputy mayor. Del?
Great, thank you. City Manager, you will call you up to the podium and
yes, thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Council. Last week, the Council indicated, or I indicated, that Forterra was willing to finance the purchase of the Wayne Golf Course, specifically the back 9, with a commitment from the city to pay Forterra back within a certain time frame. The agenda packet that you have for this evening includes the terms that Forterra has created that, if executed, would memorialize those commitments. The terms generally include that Forterra would utilize a line of credit for a period of 3 years based upon the agreed purchase price with the owner of the property, would secure the property, would attempt to receive grants for the entire amount, and less 10% provided by the City of Bothell and One Bothell. Or if they can't attain the grants, Forterra would attempt to sell the property to a private property owner for development purposes. Any amount not collected from the privates or from grants or from the private sale of property would be the city's responsibility, effectively requiring the city to backstop the acquisition of the property. At the last meeting, Council invited Forterra representatives to come speak to the Council this evening, and tonight we have, I believe, Michelle Connor and Jordan Rash will tell you a little bit about their organization and how they would approach this opportunity to assist the city in acquiring the Wayne Golf Course property, with the majority of the time really being spent tonight with Council asking questions of Forterra. So at this time, I'd like to invite Forterra representatives to provide a brief presentation to Council.
Great. City Manager, before you step away, just to be make sure everybody understands, this is a discussion item only tonight. The Council's not scheduled to take action with Forterra tonight. So this is purely just a discussion item.
And Deputy Mayor, since we have 2 representatives, I'd invite the representatives to sit at the front table if that's appropriate.
I think that would be a wonderful idea.
All right, thank you.
Good evening. I'm Michelle Connor, and this is Jordan Rash. It's an honor to be in the presence of so much community enthusiasm, and we appreciate your time and consideration. What I would like to just start with, and I've got some notes because I want to make sure to convey a number of details, is that I've been doing this work for 20 years at Forterra, and we've worked with many cities and many communities to achieve outcomes for the community objectives around conservation, and I think you guys can do it. I'm joining the work session tonight with Jordan. Jordan's already done a number of conservation projects in his career that have been complicated, challenging, and successful. As a conservation and community development organization for over the past 25 years, Forterra has conserved over 250,000 acres of parks, open space, working lands, Puget Sound shoreline, critical habitats that have been worth millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars. To accomplish this, we've brought a wide range of technical solutions, financing strategies, fundraising campaigns, and partnerships to bear on the challenges specific to each acquisition. We've worked with federal, state, and local governments to achieve these accomplishments, and we've carried it out in various capacities. We've put a proposal before you tonight, but we're quite open to working together on something that works for the city and for the citizens. So please consider it a discussion proposal. We would imagine that it would evolve over time as we worked with the city manager, the city, and the community. Examples of previously financed acquisitions that we've accomplished where we stepped in to purchase a property. If you all remember the East Lake Sammamish Railroad line that was a working railroad, we bought it as a working railroad. We took it through the Federal Surface Transportation Board process, and then we delivered it wholly repurposed as a trail to King County at basic cost. We worked with Mount Rainier National Park to secure 750 acres that they had tried to secure for 20 acres in a contentious relationship with the landowner. We helped to bridge that gap and bring it to fruition. We've worked with the Skokomish tribe to purchase in advance and to transfer to their ownership 160 acres of critical salmon habitat on the Skokomish estuary. Forterra matches stakeholder objectives with funding realities, and we're prepared to be creative about solutions to fill gaps that might occur. And when we've said in our proposal that we look to the city to fill the gap, the reason why we say that is because we want to sit down, if there is a gap, and work with the community to optimize the outcomes so that the city has a choice, and we're not just forced to sell it out into the open marketplace. It gives the city and the community more control, and we want to craft an agreement that allows that. At the same time, it is a line of credit that we will be obliged to pay back, and so we need to be able to work through that. Finally, we're very experienced in working seamlessly with city management, the community, and with the elected officials to extend your capacity and broaden resources available. And again, while we have a current proposal in front of you, it's one that we would expect to evolve in consultation with you. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jordan to talk about some of the specifics of the concept.
Great. Well, thank you, Michelle. And thank you all, Council, for having us here this evening. Protecting Wayne land is a generational opportunity to protect water quality, salmon habitat, and outdoor recreational opportunities, and as such fits very well with Forterra's mission. Over the past several months, we've talked with many interested parties, stakeholders, and community leaders to get a better understanding of the property, the community goals and its interests, as well as funding opportunities that we would use to potentially acquire Wayne land. Depending on the specific acreage and use objectives of the city, which the city would be focusing on, we believe it may be feasible to raise upwards of $5 million over a couple of grant cycles. Based on our assessment, we are pleased to be here today to explore how we may be able to help you achieve your vision for the future of Wayne land. And with that, do you want to jump into term sheet perhaps, or maybe stop there for questions?
Sure. Are there any questions at this point? Councilmember Lamb.
Hey, thanks so much for coming tonight. I really appreciate that. I had a question for you on the front nine of the Wayne Golf Course, which currently 46 acres of that are in a conservation easement, so they can never be developed. And there's 4 acres then that is owned, all of it is owned by the Richards family, but 4 acres would be subject to development. What do you see as the potential for grants on the front nine? Is it that because the land is already in a conservation easement, do you still feel that would be a quality recipient of grants, that we would have the chance to get good money for that?
So yes, and I think the price would be commensurate with the fact that the development rights have been removed. I think that the city and the community have choices. We understand that there have been a range of ideas from habitat to passive park space to having a golf course there of a limited nature. All of those things are possible. And what we would imagine is securing the property, evaluating the choices, the actual, what are the objectives that are the priorities for the community, and basically putting those puzzle pieces together to fit. If the community said we want it to be habitat, you've got Salmon Recovery Funding Board money that could be focused on restoring that land. And so for the lesser cost of the acreage, you might be able to get grants for that. Right. You guys might be able to set up a mitigation bank working in concert with King County on, a number of parts of the Wayne property that could generate revenue to help cover cost, create restoration, and actually carry the stewardship going forward. Because that's part of the mitigation obligations.
And so do you feel that having the having it as an active use, or is it, because currently it is a use that people can recreationally can go on there, do you feel that that is consistent with conservation going forward, that if the city were to acquire this property and to keep it as a recreational use, that you could do that and also have a conservation element and be eligible for conservation funds?
I could imagine. And again, I think this is something you'd want to work through, come up with a plan, design it. There are great examples of habitat protection in conjunction with active uses, and I think that's all open. And I think the range of options available to the city are extensive, and we would want to work through that with you.
All right, thank you very much.
Anybody else? Councilmember Rayum.
So I'm really happy that your organization exists and provides this service to the public. It's been an eye-opening experience to try to cobble money together on the 11th hour. My question to you is that, according to, and I might be skipping ahead here, and let me know if I am, but the term sheet really is caveated to the front nine, and I think the public and I am interested in talking about the entire golf course. So could you give us some idea of what it is that we can do to expand this conversation from the term sheet as it exists now?
We're very open to talking with any of the parties. I think I heard tonight that was a possibility, so we're prepared to work with any of the parties on the property going forward. So, quite
that was my question.
Anyone else? Councilmember Evans?
Yes, thank you for being here. I appreciate the work you do. Having been involved in similar public projects, or when projects come to the City Council, whether it's through our capital facilities plan or whatever the case may be, it's nice to be able to see the total estimated project costs. So I would hope, and as I read through your proposal here, it talked about some of the costs that the city would be responsible for is due diligence costs, insurance, liability management, maintenance, repairs, taxes, transaction costs from the first PRSA to the second one, 2.5% conservation fee to Forterra, 2.5% of what, I guess, is a question I have. All fees and interest incurred during Forterra's interim, regardless of city closing costs, second PSA, 10% funding from local sources. What does local sources mean? Does that, as a city council member, what does that mean to me out of the city budget that we have currently? And I don't know the status of the funding opportunities, the King County Conservation Futures Grant. You mentioned a lot of them that are out there, and that's great. So what I would like to see at some point, and I don't know if this comes back where we actually sign an agreement with you folks or whatever, but I'd like to see kind of a project worksheet, if you might say. And let's just, you mentioned $5 million potentially we can raise here. Let's say that's the acquisition costs. What's the bottom line? What's the cost once we put in these other things that certainly are due? I just want us as a council to know what that total cost is, and I don't know if you can get to a point of even we talk about the recreation value of that property. And these same questions came up on the North Creek Park property that we acquired. We acquired it, and then the issue came up of maintenance and development and trail development and plans and all those types of things. I think it's one thing to acquire property. It's another thing then to operate it and maintain it and preserve it for in the future. So at some point, if that you could provide that type of information, even what the passive improvements might be or projected could be on it, because I know there is limits as to what you can do with this type of property under conservation easements. I mean, I think some of us maybe have in our mind of boat launch ramps and all kinds of things. Now, whether or not those are permissible under some of these grants, I think we need to know that. So I would appreciate when we discuss again or when we get to that point is if you could give me a list of what all those potential costs are, and I realize it's an estimate at this point, but what is the bottom line cost to us and to the residents of Bothell?
Absolutely, and I guess what I would offer is I think there's some iterative process in getting to that.
Okay.
Depending on the objectives that are set for the property, then you go after certain funding sources. If you're wide open and you say, whatever the funding source is, and then we'll deal with whatever the management consequences of that are, that's a different strategy.
Yeah. Okay.
If you say, we want to have an incorporated golf course, active use on the front 9 with habitat, then we probably need to be engaging with your Parks Department to talk about their facility standards. So I think we could project some initial work on our part from a staffing standpoint. We could be very specific on the costs for due diligence. We can give budget estimates. It might be an iterative process, but we can work through all of that and would expect to work with your team here to figure that out.
That's great. I would just like to see that information as a package and then go from there. But great, I'm excited to see that and see where we can go here. Thank you.
Great. Councilmember Agnew.
Thank you for coming. What's the city's responsibility if we can't come up with all the grants? Is there an out clause that we have that's available to us? Are we liable for all the funding? What is that? And then for maintenance, are there grants out there to help us with the maintenance costs?
There are some, and I actually was remiss in not answering the question on the 10% local match. The reason why we identified that is because some of the state grants in particular require local match, and so they want it to be local money. That could be privately raised money working with the community. That could be a city allocation of funding, right? So there's a range of ways you could get there. But that will make you competitive for certain grant requirements. So that's why we put that in there.
And there are grants that can match other grants, those types of things. But
exactly.
That's the type of information would be really helpful.
To your question about the backstop, what we believe is that you will be very successful in raising some amount of money. We've not appraised the property. We don't know how much the property is worth. Once we know that, I think we can give you a better sense of the overall exposure before closing on the purchase and sale agreement. So we would work through the due diligence process and be able to project likelihood of funding based on known grant sources that this property has good criteria for, other creative solutions that might be available there. And what we would want to do is if there was an identified shortfall, would be to sit down and explore the solutions to that shortfall, which might be leasing part of the property to a user with the city having the grant, owning the ground, which might be saying, okay, those 2 acres were okay, having something happen on it to get to the rest of the property. And we would want to work through that with you. But if, as a community, the community said, we're not prepared to take that impact, because there will be, if you get to that point where there's a gap, you're making trade-offs, then we would say we have to pay off the debt. We're a nonprofit. We'll be putting our organization on the line. We'll be asking a donor to backstop us with a line, as a guarantor on the line of credit, and we have to pay off that debt. So we would just want to work with you on that. I think, I wouldn't project another gigantic recession. So in theory, this is a rising market. So that's sort of the circumstance. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. And you said you are a nonprofit.
We are.
So you got my check tonight?
Oh,
thank you.
Thank you. Good. Thank you very much.
Anybody else? Questions? Then why don't we go ahead and go through the term sheet a little more detail or the proposed term sheet that you have here?
Okay, great. All right, so we're just going to go through a very rough outline based off of what's in front of you today. Forterra would enter into a services contract with the city with a defined scope of work. We would rely on the city to cover our staff costs as well as hard costs for due diligence. Forterra would work through the city's ultimate purchase terms, then approach the landowner with an offer based on those terms to make an interim purchase. Forterra would then lease the property to the city for management and insurance coverage during the term of Forterra's interim hold. Forterra would serve as a project manager coordinating all aspects of the fundraising effort and ultimate property outcome solution set, ranging from grants to exploring a long-term leasing arrangement with, like, say, a McMenamins, and potential for mitigation banking. We'd help the city put all the puzzle pieces together and ensure all grant requirements are met. We believe 3 years provides sufficient time to achieve this outcome or to have clarity and complete a partial city purchase with an updated plan for any remaining property to be protected. When the city is ready to acquire the property from Forterra, Forterra's sale price to the city would be the sum of the original purchase price that we paid to acquire that property, any interest, any fees, any other carrying costs that we would accrue during that interim period, and then a 2.5% fee on that at the end. If at the end of 3 years some land is not funded for protection and we conclude together that there is not a viable funding strategy, Forterra would work with all concerned to optimize the potential community benefits in whatever sale was required to repay the loan. If in achieving this outcome we were unable to cover all costs, we'd look to the city to help address that gap. Our proposal is included in your package, which we're discussing right now. So with that, I suppose we can dive into more questions.
That's okay.
Councilmember Lamb.
Jordan, thank you for that outline. So I'm assuming that you got a better sense as part of that iterative process of where we would go with this. Some of the cost elements of that would be flushed out and you would have a better sense. Like, for example, if we were going for kind of a longer-term lease situation that would preserve it in perpetuity, you would say that would be a different structure than if we were trying to secure the entirety of the funding to buy it fee simple outright and do that. And just so people understand, I mean, do you see a problem, or I mean, have you been involved in situations like that where you've leased or had lease arrangements or lease to owns or like seller financing on recreational properties in the past?
Not necessarily on active recreational properties. Jordan's worked on some where we've done leasebacks with a jurisdiction, and the reason why we do that is because we can't handle the exposure of an active use property.
Understood.
And so it's really that insurance protection, which is why we need the lease back, and in this case, the management of a golf course, whether it's contracted out to a third party during the interim period, maybe the Richards would be willing to operate it during that period. Having the city be that interface is something we would be relying on. In terms of long-term ground lease, there's no reason why the city couldn't do that.
And you would be able to partner with us on that
Absolutely.
as well? Okay.
Absolutely. And so I think the goal in that case would be to figure out what that long-term financing would look like and make sure that the lease agreement was compatible with the conservation goals.
So in terms then of kind of next steps and understanding this, would it be fair to say that we need to have sort of a deeper conversation about what direction that would be headed in to be able to flush this out into something that we would actually be able to make a decision on or vote on at some point later on?
And then I could imagine if we took a first step, we might go forward to enter into a purchase and sale agreement if we could reach agreement on terms and price with the seller of the front nine.
Right.
And then at that point, we would still be in a due diligence phase.
Right.
And so we would be working actively with the community and the city as we went through that due diligence phase. We would be dual tracking evaluation of grant sources, understanding that value of the property and what's the hurdle that we have to get over to secure it. Will that price satisfy the owners? All of that would be done back and forth in iteration.
Okay. That makes sense.
Any other questions? Councilmember Evans.
So, City Manager, who would be the staff liaison that would be working directly with Forterra? Would that be out of your office, or? I mean, I know we have a new Parks and Recreation Director in the city, which this would be a great project for him to get started on. So, but
there'll likely be multiple individuals. It would be myself. It's entirely possible they'll be our new parks director as well as we start getting into the management operation of whatever we want this land to be.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Anybody have questions or comments? Further questions or comments? Councilmember Lamb?
So, I mean, it seems like this would be, I mean, an opportunity to have, I mean, I think the appropriate thing would be to have the council ask the city manager to sort of enter into conversations with Forterra about this and to further flush out what this relationship would look like moving forward. And I think that's does that seem like the appropriate next step for Forterra?
It does. I've already held several conversations with Forterra that has led to this term sheet. I think one of the first actions that the council may want to consider is the actual acquiring of an appraisal which will define certainly our largest acquisition price associated with the golf course. So.
Yeah, and I mean this kind of comes to the rub of everybody hates executive sessions, but why those conversations sometimes are better in executive session, because the concern that I would have is that because of the unique nature of this property, because 46 acres of it are in a conservation easement and only 4 acres of it are currently developable, that the price that may come back with a standard commercial appraisal may be something that the owners would say we're not interested in entertaining and we'd rather just continue on in the status quo. So I think that we need to be, I think that's something just in terms of managing public expectations. There may be multiple paths to get to a shared goal, and I think one of them would be engaging with a family that has had, I mean, this has been a golf course for 84 years, and it's been in their family for the better part of 50 years. And I think if we, that may be an option that's open to us if they're unwilling to sell at an appraised price, or if the appraised price doesn't support that. So I think that's something, is that something that Forterra?
We understand that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right.
I also say the purpose of the appraisal is twofold. One, certainly informs us of the value in terms of what to offer to the owner, but it's also a prerequisite for almost all the grants likely that Forterra would be pursuing on the city's behalf. Mm-hmm. So, in other words, not able to acquire, not able to use grant funds for property that is above and beyond the appraised value.
Right.
Can I interject something on that? I think there's also an opportunity where money can be put into the golf course that is, that improves the environment, that enhances the buffers, that improves what currently is the golf course, that would be enhance that asset and would improve that asset. That isn't necessarily going to be reflected in the purchase price, but that may be something that you could use grant funding for that might be, because I think that would probably realistically be necessary if it were to continue as some sort of an active use thing. I don't think in its current form, without, as Councilmember Evans indicated, without some additional capital investment into that, I don't know that you're going to be able to do, whether, even if you were to make it completely passive, I think there's a need for some money, and that money wouldn't necessarily be in the form of an acquisition price. It could be in terms of enhancements as well.
Councilmember Agnew.
Now, city manager, we're the ones that are going to go out for the appraisal. No, I was under the impression Forterra was going to go out for appraisal.
No, we will pay for all the transaction costs. If we decide to move forward, the appraisal, of course, is one of those transactional costs that we'd be responsible for paying for. Although it would be Forterra working with us to obtain an appraisal for the property. Mm-hmm. But we will be responsible for paying for that appraisal. Okay.
And in some cases, the grants will reimburse some of these costs, so that is a possibility.
Councilmember Sandberg.
And will the appraisal include the back 9 along with the front 9, since we have indicated that, or Forterra has indicated that they are able to pursue any options regarding the back 9?
That would be subject to council direction if you want us to do that.
On the back 9, I think it's a little more complicated than just we have to get permission from both the buyer and the seller to come to the table and talk about that. So,
well, I would make the argument that if we're going through the effort of getting an appraisal on the front 9, it would make a sense from an efficiency perspective to get an appraisal on the back 9, so that could pave the way for any discussions that we might be able to engage in on the back 9.
That would be a vote of the whole council to decide whether we do that. So So, any other questions at this point, or comments for? Councilmember Evans.
This discussion tonight was directed towards the front nine, as our agenda packet showed. Obviously, there's been a lot of discussion on the back nine also. There may very well be some savings if we got an appraiser out there doing comps and review of the property. It may not be that much more to go ahead and do it on the back nine, include that as part of that. We don't know where the back nine's going, so that may be money that we don't receive any benefit from, but I'd be interested in what the other council members feel about whether or not having an appraisal on the back nine.
Councilmember Agnew.
As I stated earlier on the dais, I'm in favor of us looking at the whole golf course, getting appraisals on both the front and the back nine. And working with Patera, King County, the state, the city of Bothell, one Bothell, and looking at trying to preserve this as best we can.
Anybody else?
So I'd like to make a motion, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I'd like to move that we direct the city manager to meet with the Richards family first, and then with Forterra to reach out to the Richards first, and then to meet with Forterra, because I think that'll give us a better sense of how to move forward in this relationship with respect to the golf course.
I'll second that. So there's a motion on the floor to direct the city manager to meet with the Richards family and Forterra on the best way to move forward on
Yeah, and if I can speak to my motion. So I think it's important that we understand that there is, I know the Richards family very well, and they're very, very good people. This is something that I know from the public's perception, and especially with something like a golf course, you need to work with the parties involved. And I think in this case, I think the Richards have a deep connection in their family to that land. I think they have a deep connection to that golf course. I think there's multiple ways that we can get to a solution that will be good for the community and good for their family. And I think the way to do that is to reach out to them through our city manager and to have a conversation with them. Because right now, I wasn't involved in the last part of the proceeding, but we essentially submitted an offer to them. They rejected that offer, and then that's pretty much where things stand. And I think that if I have great confidence in our city manager. I think he's somebody who can sit down and really listen to what it is that they want, really listen to what it is that they're open to in terms of conservation or use on that property. And I think that's the appropriate way to start the conversation. I want to applaud the people of One Bothell for having for having done that already and having sat down and met with the Richards family. They've engaged in a conversation with them, and the reality is that is the way to a solution on this situation, is to sit down and roll up the sleeves and work in good faith on this. So that's why I believe this motion is the right next step for our council and for our community.
I'd like to make an amending motion.
State your amending motion.
My amending motion would be to have the discussion with the Richards and with Forterra, but the discussion will also include the back nine as well as the front nine.
Second.
Okay, amending motion for the city manager to have a discussion with the Richards family and Forterra to include both the front nine and the back nine. And that's moved by Councilmember Agnew, second by Councilmember Sandberg. Councilmember Evans.
I guess I need a little more clarification from Councilmember Lamb as to what these discussions are. We asking them for permission to do an appraisal, or are we asking them to begin negotiations, or what would this conversation, what's the basis of this conversation?
I appreciate that question. So I think the basis of it, and I appreciate the amendment that was offered by Councilmember Agnew. I think and I'll speak to that as well. I think the purpose of that is to have our city manager, who represents our city, have an opportunity to engage in a dialogue with the owners of the front nine of the Wayne Golf Course. I'm a little bit sympathetic to Forterra at this point because we haven't engaged Forterra to do anything. We haven't paid Forterra any money at this point. And I think if they believe it would be helpful for them to sit in on that meeting and they're willing to do it gratis, then we'll certainly accept that. But I also want to be clear that this is an agency that works very hard for conservation, and this is an agency that doesn't make a profit. But they do ask, because the term sheet is clear, that we pay for their time. I think before you do an appraisal, you do need, for property that you don't own, I mean, you could go out and do a commercial appraisal, generally speaking, but you're going to need to have the permission of the owner. You're going to need to be able to come onto the property and be able to roll up the sleeves, particularly for an ongoing business. If the owner doesn't consent to it, you're not going to get very far. And I think the folks from Forterra would confirm that, especially if you're assessing an operating business on the golf course. I think when you're dealing with somebody like this family that's had this business in the community for 50 years, I don't think you do it, through a letter sent through the mail. I think you sit down. I think you say, I'm the city manager. I'm going to sit down with you. I'm going to talk with you. I'm going to hear what your vision are. And I think we'll learn something from that conversation. I think that's an appropriate conversation for our city manager to have first with the Richards family. Then I think what he can report back to us on what that conversation is. I think then we can decide much better how to frame our agreement with Forterra, because I think then Forterra will be able to say, and I'm not going to speculate as to how that conversation might go or what direction it might lead, but that's going to inform what this agreement with Forterra looks like. I think until we have that honest exchange of ideas and until he has an opportunity to communicate with them, that just isn't how things like this work. I think we've tried the approach where we're like, hey, let's shoot them over an offer and, they'll accept it. Well, they didn't. Like I said, I wasn't involved in that part of the process. I think we need to try to reset that discussion, and I think that begins with having the city manager sit down with them and have an honest conversation. I have a suspicion how they will respond to including the back nine, but I don't have a problem with that being part of the city manager's conversation. It's up to them whether they choose to engage in that or not. And so I would say, I don't have an objection to your amending motion, but I think that the city manager in direct dialogue with them is the right way for our community and for our council to move forward.
Any further discussion on the amending motion?
I made the amending motion because we've seen what indecision and a lack of an action does. We won't know if we can even purchase the back nine unless we talk about it. We need to sit down. We need to have an open dialogue with the buyer, with the seller, with the Richards, with Forterra, with King County, with the state, with the city of, to open a dialogue to see what's available to us. I think the public outcry has been tremendous on this. I think they've spoken very eloquently as to what they want us to do, and I think we need to adhere to that. But we won't know unless we ask.
Any further discussion? Councilmember Sandberg.
I seconded Councilmember Agnew's motion because I think that going forward, when we're talking about conversations regarding the Wayne Golf Course, we should always keep in mind that the end goal should be acquisition of the front nine and back nine. And so we shouldn't have to always add that as a caveat. And so I hope going forward we continue to move forward with conversations with the goal being acquisition of the entire golf course. And I support conversations between the city manager and Forterra and the owners. It was stated that the last time we made an offer, we just kind of shot off a letter, and that wasn't the best approach. That was the approach that we were required to do, because there was an intent to offer that we had to respond to within a certain time frame. And so it wasn't just a cavalier shooting off a letter, hey, why don't you think about this? This was meeting the requirement of the conservation easement and the intent to offer. So I look forward to the conversations that will occur, and I hope that they will provide additional clarity, and that we will be given the information through a refined term sheet that will encourage the council to direct the city manager to perform appraisals on the front and back nine when the time is appropriate.
Councilmember Ram.
So I'm going to make an amending motion to direct the city manager to, after the meeting with the property owners, to set up a meeting with Forterra, the buyer of the back nine, and the city, the seller, the owner, seller, whatever. Okay, let me make that clear. Amending motion to direct the city manager to set up a meeting with the Richards family, the buyer of the back nine, Forterra, the city, King County, and if possible, the state of Washington representatives to negotiate options for purchasing the entire golf course.
So we have moved by Councilmember Rayum, second by Councilmember Agnew, to have the city manager establish a meeting with the Richards family, the buyer of the back nine, Forterra, King County, and the state representatives to seek purchase of the entire golf course. Is that how?
I think you missed the city there, but it would obviously.
Well, the city manager is representing the city.
Right, implied, yeah.
So the city manager representing the city to meet with the Richards family, Forterra, the buyer of the back nine, King County, and Washington State representatives to look at options to purchase the whole golf course.
I have an inquiry of the maker of the motion.
Inquire.
So would you accept a meeting with any less than those participants, or are you saying that the city manager shouldn't hold the meeting if one of those participants declined to participate?
I think it's fine to have the meeting without all those participants. The meeting would be basically, it wouldn't matter if we didn't have the buyer of the back nine, the Richards family, and the city in Forterra together.
I'm sorry, it would or it wouldn't matter?
It would matter if those four parties were not there. The other additions are because I feel, from what I understand, the state and the county also have options to bring to the table.
So I guess what I'm not understanding on the amending motion is how that differs from the main motion, in the sense that the main motion directs the city manager to meet with the Richards family and Forterra, and then you've added a list of people that you would also like at that meeting. Are you opposed to the idea of him meeting with them with just the Richards?
I did say subsequent to the meeting with the city manager with the Richards.
So I'm glad I asked the question because I didn't understand it. So the current underlying motion is that the city manager will meet with the Richards. Correct. It was then amended to include about the front nine. It was then amended to include the back nine, and then you're saying subsequent to that meeting with the city manager and the Richards, he would then make an invitation for another meeting that would include the state, all of our local state representatives, King County, also Forterra, the Richards family, and the city of Bothell. And that's the amending motion.
And the buyer of the back nine.
And the buyer of the back nine. So all of those, and if any one of those people didn't come to that meeting, then you would say that he shouldn't go forward? I'm just trying to understand that because we're giving him direction. I'm just trying to understand that.
Yeah, I think an invitation would be extended to all parties. Having the meeting,
Okay, so people don't have to come, but you're just saying you want him to extend. We're directing him to extend an invitation.
Yes.
Okay. I think I understand it now.
Could I speak to my motion?
Just one moment. City
Okay.
Clerk. So it's city manager will invite all the above. Clear? Okay, great. Speak to your motion, please.
So what I understand is of the situation is that the Forterra needs to meet with the buyer of the back nine and the Richards family and the city to discuss expanding the scope of what they've put in front of us to the back nine. And that is why, for me, it's important that we are specific in giving direction to the city manager that we need to have the buyer of the back nine, the Richards family, and the city and Forterra in a room to discuss the purchase of the entire property.
Okay. Any other discussion?
I don't even understand the motion.
Councilmember Evans.
This meeting's going to go on forever, I think.
Yes, it is.
I'm not sure who's going to be there. But I guess I thought the original intent was to get the city, Forterra, the owners in the room and open the dialogue and start this discussion. Was that not our original intent?
That was my motion.
And then we start adding on these layers, and I guess I'm not sure when it's appropriate to add those other layers. I guess I just want to get the meeting started. And then Forterra and the city manager can come back to us and say, here's how we recommend we move forward from this point, you know. And if that involves everybody, I guess I'm a little concerned of how long it's going to take to get everybody together. If we want to move on this, let's get a meeting between the initial group and go from there. I thought that was our intent initially. I don't understand why we're adding all these layers on. Well, until we get to a point where we have a discussion, the first discussion.
Can I speak? So I'm actually not going to support this amending motion because I think that the purpose, and it was characterized, I wasn't trying to diminish the fact that we made an offer on this property and the offer was rejected. We did have to convey that offer in writing per the terms of the easement. But I think the issue is how you do that. I think that what we need to do right now is have our city manager sit down at the table with the Richards family and understand what the long-term potential solutions to this are. That was the purpose of my motion, and that I think is how Forterra will then be able to inform our going forward relationship with Forterra. It's not to create a photo op. It's not to create a situation where every elected representative from the nearby area is crammed into a room. It's really saying how do we get moving forward? How do we roll up our sleeves and get to work? And I think you only do that if you have an ability for the city manager to sit down with them to discuss it. The Richards family has had conversations with these people. I think it's really important for our city manager to have that conversation, then to have the conversation with Forterra, then to bring that back to us. At that point, if the recommendation of Forterra and the city manager is it would be fruitful to have a larger meeting with everybody else included, I'll be completely in support of that. I think that's a good thing. But I will support Councilmember Agnew's amendment. I'm not going to support the amendment that's currently on the floor.
Any other discussion? Councilmember Evans.
I guess I wanted to give Councilmember Ram the opportunity to try to get me clear on as to why can't we take this initial step and then come back and move on from there? Unless there's something that I don't know.
So there's maybe, but I tacked on King County and the state because they've been an active participant in trying to collect funds. Though they're not an absolute necessity to have this meeting, and it's not for a photo op, but the purpose of having the buyer and the seller in the room with the city and Forterra is that then the discussion can be had about the entire golf course, not just the front nine. And that's what I understand is the case. Forterra can't engage one party or the other without everybody in the room discussing the back nine.
But I think Councilmember Agnew included the back nine in there in his initial motion.
So what I understand is that you can't do that without all the parties involved in the purchase and sale agreement on the back nine.
When you say all the parties, that's the owners, and both sides you're saying of the owners there, then you're saying
the buyer and the seller that are identified in the purchase and sale agreement on the back nine have to be in the room for the conversation to expand to the full golf course.
And I'm fine with that, if they want to be in the room or to be in the room. But I guess, why do we need to go beyond that with the other granting agencies? Our city staff is well aware of what's going on at the state level and things with potential funding alternatives. I think they have that background. So I don't know what they would add to that meeting at that point other than a bigger room of people.
Any further discussion? Councilmember Sandberg, any comments?
Call the question.
Is there a second to call the question? Or
I don't think anyone else is saying anything, so we can just vote.
What's that?
This is a vote on the second amendment, just so we're clear.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
And this was moved by Councilmember Rayum, second by Councilmember Sandberg, to have
It was second by Councilmember Agnew.
Oh, there you go. Second by Councilmember Agnew, to have the city manager meet with Forterra, the Richards, the owner or the purchaser of the back nine, King County, and Washington State. For the city manager to invite all of them to have discussions about the back nine.
And the front nine.
Yes, the whole golf course. The owners of the back nine. Yeah. Clear as mud? All right. Please cast your vote. Clerk will display. Okay, the motion passes 4-2 with Councilmember Lamb and Evans in the negative. Which brings us to our first amending motion to direct the city manager to include the back nine in the discussions with Forterra.
The Richards.
And the Richards, yes. Please cast your votes. The clerk will display. Motion passes unanimously with Councilmember Freed recused, and he was recused on the last vote also. That was my mistake. So that brings us to the main underlying motion as amended to direct the city manager to meet with the Richards family, Forterra, to have an initial meeting with the Richards family and Forterra regarding the front.
It was actually to have a meeting with the Richards family and then a meeting with Forterra is the original motion, is the underlying motion.
You are correct. I just couldn't read my scribble here. So direct the city manager to meet with the Richards family, then Forterra, and after that to meet with them to include the back nine with an invitation to the county and the state and the back nine buyer. It's a convoluted way to get there, but that's how we got there. So please cast your votes. The clerk will display. Member passes unanimously with Councilmember Agnew in the negative and Mayor Freed recused. Councilmember Sandberg.
I have a question. So will any of these, the discussions on the actual purchase price or details be discussed with other council members? Or will that all be considered a part of your, like a confidential transaction between Forterra, the city manager, and the property owner?
That's how I would foresee that those discussions, because they will be potentially talking price and other terms.
Okay.
So, any other comments? Right. It's 8:36. At this point, we're going to go ahead and take a break, and we'll be back at 8:51. We're adjourned, or we're at break.
All right, Bothell City Council is back in session. I want to first turn the floor over to Councilmember Agnew.
I'd like the city clerk to know that Councilmember Agnew had a seizure in his finger and hit a no vote instead of a yes vote, and I would like the record to reflect that.
All council members okay with that correction of the vote?
I would support that.
Nope. Nobody opposing? Okay, perfect. Good. Then the record will reflect the corrected vote. Next item on the agenda is one that I failed to add, but I will also now. We all have a memo from our Public Works Department from Aaron Lionheart. And Aaron, if you're ready to jump on board in this regard, is a request to sign joint letter to King County. Do you have some words to share with us?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I apologize for the late entry. The King County Solid Waste Division has an updated plan related to their transfer stations, and Councilmember Sandberg actually discussed it, I think, under committee reports a couple weeks ago. The City of Bellevue has proposed a letter to go to Executive Constantine about the plan and is looking for other agencies to sign on for this. And the primary concern that the City of Bellevue has and that Bothell staff shares is that the updated plan would eliminate the northeast transfer station. Currently, there's one in the Houghton neighborhood of Kirkland, and the updated plan would not replace that. So it would leave a large service area without a transfer station nearby. The closest one would be either Shoreline or Bellevue.
Any questions? So what do you need from us this evening?
If I could get council action to have the mayor sign on to the Bellevue letter that's included with the memo that's on your dais.
I would support that.
Second.
Okay, Councilmember Sandberg.
What is the time sensitivity on this issue? Because we have talked about this at great lengths at Sound Cities, and I feel that it's a conversation that could happen at Sound Cities, and I don't think that they've seen this letter. And there is, and I'm sorry, I haven't even had taken the opportunity to read it. So I'm uncomfortable having us sign on to this letter knowing the contentiousness of the issue at Sound Cities and how it might affect, for example, some of our neighbor cities. I mean, Kirkland and Woodinville. I'd like to have opportunity for greater discussion than just directing the mayor to sign it tonight. So does it need to be signed by tonight, or can it be reviewed and have conversation with other jurisdictions? Because Sound Cities will be meeting again I think it's next Wednesday.
So the comment period closes tomorrow, and the City of Kirkland has already said that they are going to approve signing on to this letter.
And have you heard from Woodinville?
The Woodinville cities of Sammamish, Renton, Mercer Island are seeking council approval to sign the letter as well.
Well,
I don't know about Woodinville.
And then, I'm sorry, I feel I'm disadvantaged because I haven't read it. So can we take a moment to just read it? Because I think one of the conversations that we had was the cost of a new transfer station was upwards of like $20 million. Does that sound about right to what you remember?
It does, and I apologize. I sent staff home that has more information about this particular item.
Because, well, okay, can you just say briefly what it is that this letter is proposing?
So what it is that this letter is proposing is to ask the county to reconsider, and due to reasons such as regional equity, and just to reconsider the decision to take the station out, the Northeast Council or station.
And is Redmond a signer on here?
No, they are not.
So the arguments are that it could have an increase on garbage hauling rates because of having to travel further distances. Self-haul would have to travel further, which also, both of those impact environmentally, traffic, congestion, different things like that, as well as the regional equity issue.
Mm-hmm. True, but I mean, the Sound Cities group had discussions about how the existing capacity could be met at these transfer stations, and $20 million has to come from somewhere. So there is a significant cost associated with supporting a direction that calls for the building of a new Northeast Transfer Station. And is that what this letter does?
So what this letter does is it requests that the county fully vet with stakeholders, with all of the stakeholders, about removing the Northeast Transfer Station. Because at this point, removal of the Northeast Transfer Station is perceived by some involved that there wasn't as much vetting to that either. So to have a more detailed conversation about all of the aspects of it, that they don't feel has come to fruition. As you mentioned at the Sound Cities, it sounds like that hasn't been resolved yet either. So this letter would be essentially to ask to take a pause on approval of this latest plan and wait and let it play out further. It's not saying you must put a Northeast Transfer Station back in.
Do you have any further thoughts? No? Councilmember Ram?
I was wondering when this would come. I know this is a pretty hot button issue. It was when I was at the Sound Cities Association. I really can't support signing or agreeing to sign this letter because I have some concerns. Well, Woodinville's not even on here, and I think they're the location this is going to be cited. So I would like to find out a lot more about this before we agree to sign it. So.
Okay. So I appreciate both of your concerns. There's 5 council members up here who are in favor of me signing it, as I understand. If that number's wrong, please correct me. Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you, Aaron. If you could...
Just delaying the process for more discussion.
So if you want to speak, maybe you could put your microphone. Perfect.
Well, based on what the staff said, it's just a slowdown to take a look at things. And I guess I don't know why we wouldn't want a transfer facility in this inn, where a majority of the population is.
Does Bothell want to host a new Northeast Transfer Station?
I don't know. Nobody's asked us.
Because I think Woodinville has been asked, and Woodinville has been looked the most strongly at for the location of a new transfer station, and it was my impression that they were not particularly excited by that.
But why wouldn't we want a facility somewhere in the northeast portion of the county here to serve our residents? Instead of granting, siting is going to be a challenge, but first we need a facility and then, or to talk about a facility and then site it.
If we do need a new facility, and I think that's what a lot of the discussion centered around.
Okay. So are we going to have back and forth, or we're going to move forward? All right. So whatever you need from me, please let me know, and we'll do that.
Mayor?
Yes.
Can we take it to a formal vote?
Absolutely. Is there a motion?
So I would move that we authorize the mayor to sign the letter.
Second. So we have a motion and a second. We've had discussion. Is there further discussion?
I'd like to speak to it if I can.
Great.
It says, the letter concludes the draft report identifies significant impacts to all of Northeast King County that have not been adequately addressed nor vetted with stakeholders. We urge the county to carefully consider the future and plan a system that provides a geographically balanced, flexible system of transfer stations that is able to meet the needs of a growing county without placing an undue burden on just one area. It's signed by all the Bellevue City Council members. It's signed by the mayor of Bellevue, as well as it sounds like the mayor of Kirkland and now the mayor of Bothell. I think it seems to me like a very positive and relatively innocuous statement on the issue. So I support you sending that.
Okay. No further comments? If everybody could place their vote. And the clerk display. Passes 5-2. Thank you, Aaron. I'll be here all evening if you need me to sign anything, or are you just going to put my name at... Okay, perfect. So boards and commissions update here. In our packet, we have our Landmark Preservation Board and also Planning Commission members to vote on. We've already done voting, I think it's been at least 5 weeks ago, on the other positions. So tonight we need to address these. So first round, we can actually place our vote for the first round for Landmark Preservation Board as well as Planning Commission Board, because I don't believe, there are double names on here. So let's just first do Landmark Preservation Board. If everybody could place a check on who they're in favor of. And we'll put it up here. Who's counting? Our clerk? Okay. So if you want to turn them face down, that way I can hand them confidentially to our clerk. Oh, great. Thanks, Joe. Okay. We're taking a pause while Councilmember Sandberg pulls up her notes.
That's why I made 2 X's.
Uh-oh. There's 2 positions. Okay, Councilmember Sandberg. Did you vote, or are you? Oh, you will. Okay. She's still okay.
So we are voting on the Landmark Preservation Board first and then the Planning Commission?
That's correct. So 6 council members have voted and already handed in their voting tablets. If you wouldn't mind yours as well. Thank you. We'll just take a 30-second pause for the tally.
First one appointed to one of the positions, position number 4, which expires in 2018, would be Claudia Ellsworth.
Okay.
And there was a tie on the second position between Daphne Taylor and Roger Corbin.
Okay. So we will vote again and only vote for those 2 people. Okay. Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And thank you for those who are willing to serve. Next is our vote for the Planning Commission. We do have potentially 2 rounds, so if everybody can make sure they vote on the first round and turn it face down for confidentiality.
Term that expires in 2019. Now, because of that, there's an unexpired term on the Parks Board. So I have.
Oh, good. We will take those. Yes, Councilmember Evans.
I would recommend that to fill that unexpired term is Kathy Dressler, who has a background in Parks and Recreation and interested in serving. Oh, that's great.
Great.
Yeah.
For the unexpired term on the Parks and Rec Board, which would expire in 2017.
Great. Thank you.
I would also support Ms. Dressler. She was extremely qualified and had an extensive background in parks.
I got one to Tom.
Unanimous decision for Kathy Dresser for the unexpired term on the Park and Recreation.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so
And I will notify all of them tomorrow.
great. Thank you. So we're going to need to ratify it with a vote or motion.
I would move to ratify the people who were just announced by the clerk.
And we'll second that. You stated on the Landmark Preservation Board the positions which those two people will hold. So I just want to, in that ratification, just reference the clerk's direction in that manner.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So any discussion? Seeing none, if everybody could place their vote. And the clerk display. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. No abstentions. Great, thank you. So I'd like to open a public hearing, continued public hearing rather, regarding the 2015 periodic plan and code update. We've scheduled for an hour and a half for this, and so it should be a lively, late discussion. Bruce Blackburn, the floor is yours, sir.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council, and members of the public. This, of course, is your continued public hearing on the 2015 periodic plan and code update. I'm not going to provide you a presentation tonight due to the late hour, and also from the standpoint that we provided you a pretty extensive presentation on April 21st. But I do have a couple things to put into the record. We have 3 exhibits to bring into the record. The first is Exhibit VS, Revision Statement E1, which is an email from Mr. Stotskad. The second one is a letter from Ms. Leon DeSorieri, which is Exhibit CV, Country Village E6. And the final is a letter from Mr. Apollo Furman, and that is going to be Exhibit WS for Juanita Simons, E, Environment 30, or, I'm sorry, E, Element, Exhibit 37. And as I identified, I'm going to save you the agony of a presentation at this time of night. And I think what we'll do, what we'd recommend is that you to take some public testimony, and after public testimony, provide some additional direction to staff for the next public hearing, which would be April the 12th. So thank you very much.
Okay. Who's this from?
That was from Mr. Apollo Furman.
Okay. A lot of cutting and pasting. Okay. Well, does anybody want to jump in with questions?
I would suggest we just move to public comment given the hour.
Okay. We have Mr. Mike Johnson is first. Sir, we have your address for the record.
Thank you. Mike Johnson, former council member and planning commissioner. I noticed that the planning commission has proposed to remove the cut-through traffic policies and the sub-area elements and place them in the citywide policies. Additionally, I understand from your April 21st meeting, the planning commission did not spend any significant time discussing this issue. It is my hope that the council will not endorse the planning commission's recommendation. In early 2000, the city embarked upon a development of a street plan that would have created neighborhood cut-through traffic throughout Bothell. Many of Bothel's residents were extremely upset during the council street plan process, as well as the council staff actions to make that a reality. During my tenure of public service, we wrote these policies to protect the subareas as well as the residential neighborhoods of Bothell. As written in each of the sub-area elements in the development regulations, this language makes it difficult for future modifications of the comprehensive plan and the development regulations without a very considered and deliberate discussion by decision makers to the changes in both documents relative to the sub-area plans that they were written. It also takes away the ambiguity and potential interpretations which staff may read into citywide policies versus sub-area specific language. With the Planning Commission proposed change to strike this language and place it in citywide regulations, staff now, in my opinion, has made it significantly easier for future modifications to, or the interpretation of the comp plan and development regulations, to modify the strong intent that was written and thereby create potential for future unanticipated consequences. Staff indicated during your meeting that normal planning would not design cul-de-sacs, and this is probably correct in a city which has already developed much more of a grid, such as Seattle or LA. But we recognized during our tenure on the Planning Commission, on the Council, that Bothel's topography and the lack of funding to create a significant grid would lead to cut-through traffic. For this reason, I don't support loosening this language. Erring on the side of preventing cut-through traffic is the way to go. We have seen all too often when the city has made a decision, it cannot reverse it without incurring legal liability from a developer or proposal. I would rather have a few dead-end cul-de-sacs than cut-through traffic in that this language prevents. And seriously, once 405 tolls start occurring, we'll find increased bypass demand that will cut through many of Bothel's neighborhoods. And I'd rather strongly protect the peace and serenity of my Bothell neighbors and then create a nightmare of cut-through traffic. So I'd implore each of you to think carefully about this and keep the language as is and do not try to fix something that isn't broken.
Great. Mr. Johnson, Councilmember Lamb has a question. Nice timing, by the way.
Yeah, right to 3 minutes.
I didn't think I'd make it.
So my question was, is it your belief that if it's not, that the language as is, if it was just in the citywide, that it would need to be modified further, or is it just that it's easier to modify, that you would have to deliberately go through and change it in each sub-area in the future, which could undermine it, and it would sort of call it out more? I guess I'm not understanding.
The point is that if you look back into the comprehensive plan and the development there, and Mark, I'm not sure that I think we worked on it on the Planning Commission, not at the City Council at that point in time.
Well, I think we worked on it.
But we did a lot of work.
We had some late nights on City Council as well.
And late nights, you're right. The issue is that when you look at it from the context of when we did this, we said specifically, like in the downtown element, we didn't put that in. We said the downtown, a grid made sense, because we were dealing with the development in downtown, so that all made sense. In the neighborhoods, we said not. So we looked at each specific sub-area of the neighborhoods and saying, what are we doing? What is here? And what we realized is there were some roads that were proposed, but we couldn't build a whole grid. We can only build a few of them. And as development occurs, people will naturally go to those areas. Now, if you put it into the citywide element, there's no definition of which sub-areas and what it applies to. The neighborhood came out in droves. I think Pat said last time you met, I was watching the video, that 500 people, I was there. I saw what was going on, and I was very concerned about it. Realistically, I have 20 years' experience as the roadway design supervisor for the city of Seattle. Technically, I'm a civil engineer, and I'm a statewide city standard county. God, I haven't been here in a long time.
It's all right. You're doing well.
But, quite honestly, a lot of people build grid because it will disperse traffic. We don't have the money to create that grid. So the minute we start introducing small little connections, tolling on 405 and the traffic burden we experience today will actually increase. And our neighborhoods are going to get the burden. It's important. Your question was asked me if I put it into the citywide element. There is interpretation because you have you have the urban design element, you have the transportation element, they have to work in concert. Once you put it in that sub-area element, it's not supposed to be done there. Staff has indicated they've had problems with it. And it was done on purpose. It was to protect those neighborhoods. If you take it out, there is interpretation that occurs. And I believe that interpretation will add connectivity.
And I guess further to your point, you were saying that in the city, in the downtown area, it actually isn't present right now. And if you put it in the city area.
When we wrote it, it isn't present. I was trying to find the downtown element to make sure that I could verify that. But you guys have the documents that are more current than I do.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Out of curiosity, you mentioned the 500 people that came for that meeting. Was that for the grid issue, or is that for Tent City?
That was actually, it was a street plan meeting that we had at the Senior Center. It was not Tent City.
Specific just for that issue?
It was specific for the street plan.
Wow. That's interesting.
I think Tent City was actually at the Anderson building.
And as a matter of fact, I had a kidney stone, and
I remember that as well. That's
got to be a bad memory.
So yeah,
it was kind of a Hobson choice of kidney stone or
time, and I had a choice. Either go for one pain or the other. Thank you very much.
You chose wisely.
I have a sign up here from George, but I think he was signing up as if it was for the public visitor section. Anna Agar, you're in the next on the list.
Ann Agard, 16524 104th Northeast. I want to address 3 issues this evening related to the area-wide policies. The first is SEPA. And as you know, before you adopt this 2015 periodic code and update, you must do a SEPA evaluation. I looked on the website and I could not find anything that has been done to date except a scoping notice. But I do want to bring an issue to your attention, and that is highlighted in WAC 197.11.0603B, which states that all proposals that are interdependent and parts of a larger proposal must be evaluated in the same environmental document. As you also know, you have taken out the Wayne Golf Course area from the current consideration for June 30th, but plan to consider it later in the year, as well as several issues up on the 3rd Avenue Meridian area. And therefore, I believe you have a real problem, because these are all part of the code update and they must be evaluated together. The second issue has to do with the transportation element, and in the GMA 3670A0706B, it talks about the requirements for concurrency and that you need to have a financial commitment in place at the time that to implement or strategies within 6 years. If you look at the draft area-wide document, TRA13, you will see that the proposal is to extend this to 10 years. This is inconsistent with GMA, and I do not believe that you can do this legally. The third issue has to do with the natural environment policies. And a number of very important policies have been removed from this section under the grounds that they are inconsistent with the recently adopted Shoreline Master Program. This is absolutely incorrect, and I have proposed a number of policy revisions, in particular the one NEP 8 that relates both to the Sammamish River and North Creek. Those policies that I have drafted for your consideration, which are not in the current document, are taken from the WIRA 8 planning policies and are consistent with the Shoreline Master Program.
Thanks. If you could just wrap up your comments, that'd be great.
I would like to finish my sentence.
I just said if you could wrap up your comments, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I would like you to consider these policies that I have proposed and look at including them in the natural environment policy section.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
One
Appreciate your
final
comment.
thing.
Well, that was the end of your sentence, but how much more time would you need?
I need to ask a question.
Okay.
Could you please put the exhibits that have been entered on the website so that we can see them?
Okay, thank you. And I believe you have a question if you have another second.
Yep.
Oh, I just wanted to make sure that the speaker had time to have her question asked, so.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
That was the main thing.
Just like all speakers, I give people equal time, equal treatment throughout the city. It's when you get to the end of 3 minutes, if somebody's in the middle of a sentence, absolutely finish that.
I would just point out that the timer starts as I walk up to give you the papers. I checked it when I got back down before I have started speaking. So in terms of equal treatment, I think you ought to at least wait till you get to the podium to start to speak before you start the timer.
Absolutely.
Thank
Good.
you.
I think
Please
that's
do
an
that.
excellent idea.
I take a lot of time to prepare these for you, and it shouldn't be deducted from my time because I do take that time to give you the written document.
Well, I will admit, and I've actually seen in other jurisdictions, and I hope in the new city hall we actually have a timer up there. So we actually can't see it from here. So it'd be really nice for all of us to actually see the 0 start and then climb up to 3. So my hope is in the new city hall we have that opportunity. All right.
My hope is that when we have a topic of discussion and we have very few speakers signed up to speak or in the audience wanting to speak, that we can be flexible on the time that they do speak, because it is showing respect for the effort that they are showing to prepare and bring their comments to us.
Absolutely do show respect. So thank you so much, Councilmember Sandberg. Okay, thank you. Let's see if there's anybody else from the public that would like to share this evening. Ma'am, we are at the end of the discussion. I'm going to see if there's anybody else in the public who might want to contribute this evening. Thank you so much. Is there anybody else who would like to take part in public discussion? Sir, if you come forward.
Excuse me, would you like to repeat that on the dais?
Yeah, I would like to say that we have the opportunity to run the meeting, and I'm treating everybody with equal time with 3 minutes. If there's opportunity for council members to ask questions of that speaker, they're welcome to do so. Our protocol manual sets aside 3 minutes per speaker. If you would like to change that, by all means, you have that opportunity.
And I'm just bringing up from the perspective and comments that I've received from the public that it doesn't feel very respectful. And so I just wanted to bring that to your attention and to let the public know that we are interested in hearing them.
And we are absolutely interested in hearing the public, and all the public equally. Absolutely. Mr. Furman.
Apollo Furman, 11203 East Riverside Drive. Mr. Mayor, council members, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you. I'm speaking in favor of the South Riverside Drive rezone request. I apologize for the number of documents. I just want to talk through one. Hopefully it'll help explain the overview of the rest of the documents. Basically, currently it's zone 9600. We're talking about 7 acres. When we went through the preliminary request evaluation, city staff looked and saw that approximately 40% of the land will be unbuildable due to critical areas, buffers, slopes, and the like. An additional 20% would be unbuildable due to critical infrastructure such as roads, sidewalks. So 60%. Not arguing, just for simple math. As you look up here, that leaves us with approximately 144,000 square feet, which, just want to point out, regardless of lot size, that is the exact same amount that could be put in a buildable lot. Looking at BMC 1214-030, the residential area and dimensions, the side yard, front yard, backyard, setbacks are all the same. Building heights are the exact same. And most importantly for this, as you see here, the maximum building coverage is 35%. So, simple math, out of 144,000 square feet of land that could be put into lot sizes, 50,400
could be and will be put under a building of some kind. The only question here is whether that amount of land will be on more environmentally friendly lot sizes of 7,200 square feet, or whether they'll continue to be on sprawling, low-density, 9,600 square feet. Keep in mind that half of this property will be in buffers and setbacks and things, so the look and feel of the lots will be like 13,000 or 14,000 square foot lots. I'm down to a minute. A couple other things. With this, the impervious surface, as far as roads, critical infrastructure, and everything else, will be the exact same regardless of number of lots, whether you're talking 15, 16, 20. And looking at the general idea of the Growth Management Act, just sum that up, prior to the GMA, this property would have achieved around 26 to 28 lots. The Growth Management Act was enacted to try and encourage higher densities in areas such as this. Our property was in the downtown area until recently. There was a bus stop on our property, or immediately adjacent. We're a short bike ride away from the park and ride. All the things you can think of, reasons why you would want an additional 5 homes, which is the maximum we're looking at here, is in this. Again, I want to end quickly. I support the Planning Commission's recommendations and hope that you do as well. Thank you if you have any questions.
Great. Thank you, sir. Any questions? Appreciate you keeping your comments in 3 minutes, by the way.
So I had an opportunity to read the public comments. Sure. So on council, we got a summary of exhibit name and number, and then sort of the gist of what the comment was. So, and then I went down to the city to read those. And some of the concerns that were expressed for your particular application was traffic on Riverside Drive. And so, do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure.
Or what?
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
To cut you off. I'm sorry. Yeah, on traffic, first off, the city did a preliminary review and determined that there would be, I forgot the exact term, I have it here, negligible. At most 5 additional vehicle trips during the peak time, which would be over 2 hours, so you're talking an additional car every 24 minutes. Personally, I mean, we all know Riverside Drive at certain times is different, but that's the traffic that is not from there. And when you look at, again, thinking big picture, you would have an additional 5 homes of people who are living right next to a bus stop. I am within walking distance, easy bike distance of the park and ride. We're 250, 300 feet away from the Burke-Gimman Trail. As far as trying to put people where they can actually use mass transit, there aren't many better places other than maybe right in downtown Seattle or something. And again, we're talking about 4 or 5 homes. The traffic, when I come home, I mean, I know there are issues, but when you look at this part of East Riverside Drive, when I leave or when I come home, I've been watching it. I have not had to stop for more than 1 car to turn into my property. And I know that there's traffic down the end. And I remember when I was, the most I've ever had to take to get to the post office is about 5 to 10 minutes at most. Again, there's an issue. I mean, we all know that there's traffic coming through, and there's cut-through traffic, but that is, again, trying to get people, I always point out, if you lived here, you'd be home now. Well, the people that are cutting through, if they live there, they'd be stopping there. I mean, it's, does that answer, kind of? I mean, it's...
Yes, it did. Thank you.
But, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else?
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Furman. Any other folks from public wish to speak tonight? I don't see any other hands. Sir, you were standing. I don't know if it was just to see the screen. Okay, great. Okay, so to council.
I had a couple of questions of staff,
Absolutely.
if that's okay. Or does anybody else want to go first? Or okay. So I had a question for either, I think for Bruce, with respect to the question that former Deputy Mayor Johnson raised on the overall grid traffic plan and changing it. What is your response to that? I mean, if it really is do you believe that this change would make it easier to have grid, or what is the problem that's attempting to being solved by this change?
Actually, we have Senior Planner Boyd is going to provide for that.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
I did bring just a couple of images. At the last meeting, there was a request that or there was some discussion about this, and I did offer that that there would be an opportunity to show you some examples here. And while I pull that up, also Community Development Director Weislogel had some background on the process that the city went through and the contentious meeting that was raised, and he might fill you in on that, because that was before my time.
He doesn't look poised to speak, but I don't know if that's...
Well, I can stall for time while Dave is bringing that up. It was contentious. And actually, it was a street plan. It was something that the Public Works Department was proposing at the time, and I remember feeling tremendous sympathy for the then brand new Public Works Director who came into this absolute firestorm. Like most things, the genesis for this was fairly is innocent and well-meaning. Mike Johnson recognized that a grid does disperse traffic evenly throughout the system, and so that was the concept, I think, that was being forwarded. But the grid was seen as being equivalent to cut-through traffic. They're not necessarily the same thing. They can have that impact. But the public reaction to this perception that the grid would result in a lot of cut-through traffic was dramatic, and essentially stopped that effort. And the carryover concerns championed by Mike made their way into the plan, both in the planning area-wide elements, the urban design element, and in each of the sub-area plans. So, was that enough time, Dave, for you to get your... Okay.
I'm ready now. Thank you. If you could dim the lights for me, I'd appreciate it. I just have 2 slides, 4 images to share with you to give an example of what this policy and the accompanying regulations in the code have created. A couple of examples of situations that they've created. This is in the Shelton View sub-area. This is the Shelton Estates development that was done in 2 phases. And because of the provisions preventing these developments from creating a connected street network from Meridian over to 3rd Avenue Southeast, both streets were cul-de-sacs, and the code provisions also required that emergency vehicle access be provided, even if regular vehicle access wasn't provided. So that's what this driveway, basically, this passageway between the 2 cul-de-sacs is. And I don't know if you can read it here, but this sign says emergency vehicles only. Well, we soon began getting complaints from the residents in that area that traffic was using that. We also met with our fire marshal's office, who explained that they did not use this access. So this is just one example of the kind of connective streets that the comp plan policies and the resulting code regulations were creating. Similarly, Aaron Estates development here, a street was developed that would connect to future development on this site. This cul-de-sac here is described in the plat as a temporary cul-de-sac, but again, the code would create an impediment to connecting that street through, even though it is platted. Similarly, in Maywood Hill, we have a street network, 237th here, that the street is platted through to connect, to create a connection between 19th and 15th. But again, a temporary cul-de-sac has become a permanent feature there, and that connectivity that we think would make sense is currently impeded by the code. So those are the actual code changes there on the right that we're proposing that would keep language in the code and the policies to avoid creating cut-through traffic unnecessarily, but allow rational development of connected street networks. And I think we've seen in the comments about the traffic problems coming off of Norway Hill on we need 100th and East Riverside Drive is where you have, in this case, by the virtue of there being few river crossings available, that you really create some bottlenecks when you don't create alternative, more of a connected network of streets. And these policies and code requirements tend to impose that where it's not really necessary, where the topography does allow connected networks. So those are the problems that we're trying to address. So,
just to follow up on that, so I mean, it seems like the proposal. I mean, just to be fair, it seems like the proposal is that you would the proposed changes are to allow more connectivity.
Yes.
Okay.
Where it makes sense, as in these examples that I've shown you.
So where is it that we would have in the citywide where would you perceive a situation where you wouldn't allow it because it would potentially cause cut-through traffic?
I don't have specific examples, but that would be evaluated on a case-by-case basis where there was a clear connection that would be better not to create. But
I guess that's what I was wondering.
I can certainly come back with
yeah, I mean, maybe that would be helpful in the next conversation is to say come back and see, because I mean, to me that would I would be interested in seeing where you would say this if we were to, because I think the comment was, hey, this is making it too vague and it leaves it open to interpretation. So I think at least at this snapshot in time, I'd like to see what that interpretation would be. And if you could, and you've shown us examples of you're like, hey, I'd like to see connectivity here. If you could show us an example where you're like, no, evaluating the overall citywide plan, this is a place where I wouldn't approve of connectivity, I think that'd be helpful.
Actually, I can think of an example, not a specific example, but where we would propose traffic calming measures on streets where we wanted to discourage cut-through traffic, but still wanted to provide neighborhood-to-neighborhood connectivity.
Okay.
That's the sort of...
So I guess my question would be if there are instances where you think you just wouldn't want to have connectivity at all because of the potential for cut-through traffic, I'd be interested in hearing that. If the answer is no, that's an okay answer and that's an honest answer, but I guess if you could have some time, and I don't expect you to do it on your feet tonight, but just think about that and come back and say, in these scenarios that you've outlined, we would want to have connectivity. If there's ones where you wouldn't want to have it, I'd be interested in seeing that as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks.
Councilmember Ram.
I have other questions, but I wanted to ask a question about connectivity, the cut-through traffic, the modifications to this code. So can we take topics at a time, or do we just get one shot?
Yeah, the floor is yours.
Okay.
He asked all the questions that he had, I believe. Now you can ask all your questions.
Yeah. So it's near my house, and so I just wanted to bring it up. So 242nd Street Southeast was installed, let's say, within the last 6 years or so, and they had a lot of cut-through traffic through there to the point where they have since modified the street so that the one-way traffic is in there. So how did that happen under the existing code, and then how does this change help the existing code not make it so we have cut-through traffic going through neighborhoods?
I'd have to look into that specific issue a little bit more carefully and come back with a response. But I think if there are more opportunities if you reduce the number of opportunities to make those connections, then they get funneled into the few that are left. And I think that's part of what happened on 242nd.
242nd is at least 12 to 14 years old, that development, though.
Is it that one? Oh, okay. I just remember when it went in.
I think it's probably the prior code.
Was it built prior to the cut-through traffic coming into play?
Citizen outcry, potentially even bigger than the Wayne Golf Course. No. that came out, and we ultimately made it a one-way at the top of the road.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Other council members? Councilmember Sandberg.
So our speaker, Ms. Agard, brought up a couple of issues that I would like staff to address. I don't know if you have the letter over there. You're looking. Would you like a copy of the letter so that, because she made the argument that our SEPA may be in violation, that the transportation element may not be consistent. Should we just have staff get back to us on that later?
Well, that's the better thing to do. I can tell you this, though. I don't think we've issued SEPA yet, correct? Yeah, we haven't issued SEPA yet. So that determination has not been made. And typically on big projects like this, we want to wait until we have the Planning Commission's recommendation. So there is a proposal to analyze in terms of environmental impacts. Let's see.
So do we issue the SEPA at the same time that the council approves the major plan update?
Oh,
They
no,
go
no.
together?
No, SEPA has to be done, that threshold determination has to be done prior to your action. In fact, we have to allow for the 21-day comment and appeal and concurrent appeal period before you would act.
So that 21-day period has to be noticed prior so that it allows for potentially, we were talking about an adoption on June 16th?
The comment and appeal period has to be over and done prior to your action, whenever that action occurs.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. As to Ms. Agard's concern about the transportation element and the natural environment element, I think we need to see her letter, and then we'd like to respond to you in a little more thoughtful manner than we could do tonight.
Okay. So I don't know how you wanted to proceed, but I prepared some comments for each of the major elements, for most of them. And so I have copies of them
That's excellent. Thank you.
to pass down. I apologize that I didn't get them to you in advance. Maybe I can pass them down, and we can also discuss them at the study. We have a study session for this topic next week as well.
Great. Let's just take a second. We'll pass those down the road, and you can lead us through what you've handed out.
Oh, I must have missed a couple copies. I only have 4. Maybe you can share.
Let's just leave Councilmember Spivey and Evans out.
Okay.
Come on, Tom.
Is that what you wanted to do? I mean, is that what sort you
No,
were
this is
envisioning,
perfect.
that we would kind of go element by element and make our comments?
Yeah, we have what you have here, and appreciate you putting it before us.
Okay.
So the floor is yours.
The floor is mine. Now I don't have the paper in front of me, so now I have to find it. Okay. Okay. So, with the vision statement, and also I know I want to be cognizant of the time. We had a meeting, and we extended the meeting to 10:30, and so we have, I don't know how much time we have left on this particular agenda item, but then we also have the fire services presentation. So, do you want me to just read through them, or?
Yeah, absolutely. This is your opportunity to make an impact on the.
You know what? I'm sorry. I have a thought. Because the last time I talked about the fact that we were going to try and meet our population capacity in Snohomish County by putting the an RAC zoning in both the Canyon Park area and the Country Village area, and I said that that I wanted to make sure that we did not miss the opportunity to provide for affordable housing in those areas. And I also feel that if we're going to be increasing the intensity in those areas, we should be providing for other amenities like parks and other infrastructure like transportation. But I see that we have Arthur Sullivan here from Arch, who is our expert on housing affordability. And so I was wondering if you wanted to give us any comments on how we might incorporate affordability elements into those RAC zones. Are you prepared to do anything like that, or no?
Arthur, you're welcome to do so tonight, or take consideration of the document that we have and come back at the next council meeting. We'd be happy to have you sit at the table with us and share your thoughts. It's up to you. Absolutely. Please do so.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Arthur Sullivan, Program Manager of Arch.
I hate to interrupt you, just to make sure that the green light is on.
Yes, it is.
Great, thank you, sir.
So I think, in general, we have worked with a number of jurisdictions who have looked at exactly the questions you've asked, which is when they look at zoning capacity, is there an ability to link affordability to those actions? We've probably worked with 7 or 8 cities in East King County who have done that. They've all done it differently, using similar principles but landing in different places. Generally, for the general comprehensive plan policy is to have some language that would support going through an analysis when you're doing zoning actions. And I do believe you do have some policy, I'd like to go back and double check, that sets that up on a general level. Whether or not when you get to your sub-area plan you want to reinforce that some more, happy to sit down with staff and look at that as well. But you do have some general policy language now that sets the stage for that. You might want to take it a step further because you have a specific area you're looking at, and happy to look at that with your staff.
Well, I would like to take it a step further, but I'd hate for you to do a lot of work and then us not adopt that. So I'm wondering if, to consider it. So I'm wondering if there is agreement on council to have Mr. Sullivan review our the housing element language, the land use element language, and the sub-area language to see where we can be more specific about providing for affordability in those zones.
And I think if I could clarify my comment, the approach potentially at this point in time for the council's consideration is not to say we are going to do it, but rather language that says we are going to evaluate it as we go further into the plan, so that the policy is there to evaluate it without an explicit decision at this point in time. So that's an approach that also could be looked at as well, and typically would be more the approach at this stage of the planning process.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thanks for coming tonight. Appreciate what you're doing throughout King County and beyond.
So is that worthwhile for him to pursue?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. All right, good. Thank you. Okay, vision statement. So when I looked at the first vision statement, or the first item, and let me get to it on my, it seemed like we're using terms that I don't feel have strong definition, like what is responsible development, what is an ethos of sustainability. And then I said I don't support the changes to the last bullet on page 3 because it introduces vague terminology. So I would like that to stay the way it is. And if you want, I can just run through these and you can save your comments for later or talk about them individually.
No, Councilmember Evans.
I don't know where we're at time-wise on this, but Councilmember Sandberg's giving some information here. And maybe, I don't know, because we have another item on the agenda here, right? We do.
We absolutely do, but there was a requested time of an hour and a half.
Okay.
And we're 30 minutes into the hour and a half.
For this item?
That's correct. Right?
Well, we don't have to take the whole time. Let me see if I can hit the highlights for you. Okay. So in the vision statement, also, it seems like we should include something about our college campuses. When I think about the vision for our community, it now includes the colleges, and yet they're not mentioned in the vision statement. So I think some mention is worthwhile there. In the land use element, one of the big issues is that we are really over planning for our population capacity by a significant amount. So we have a deficit, a population deficit of 3,544 in Snohomish County that we have to plan for, and yet it looks like we are accommodating that 40% higher than it needs to be, and we also have significant population capacity overage in King County. So I guess as a policy level discussion, why are we over accommodating for growth more so than we have to?
Bill?
I can respond to that because we have to update the plan every year. If you just plan to accommodate the growth for that particular planning cycle, what do you do in 8 years when you have to find a place for more growth? So it's smart and good planning to provide more capacity than you need for that particular cycle. There's a future past this update. There will be other updates.
True, but when we do that, other jurisdictions are not doing the same, and so the potential is that we accept far more growth than what we were even targeted for.
Well, it doesn't work that way, though. We have our own assigned targets. We don't take additional population or jobs that other jurisdictions say they can't. It's just looking farther down the road.
Okay.
I think it's what planning is about.
Yes, I believe it's accommodating the targets that were given, and maybe not 40% more, but.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
So, is what you're saying, Director Weislegel, that by accommodating a larger number, because we don't update this plan every single year, is simply a function of the fact that we don't update the plan every single year, and that we need to plan for multi-years in advance, not just 1 year? Is that essentially it?
Yes, that is essentially it. And it's the recognition that there will be future GMA-mandated plan updates where we're being asked to accommodate more population. And if that population capacity is already there for the next update, then our job is simple.
Okay.
I believe your fear is if we already agree to do so, then they're going to even up it even further. Is that right?
That's a possibility, but my real concern is that I think people are accepting of growth as long as the infrastructure and amenities are provided per the concurrency requirements of the Growth Management Act. But what happens is we get growth and we experience through increased traffic and lack of parks and other infrastructure and amenity deficits, we experience that we get growth, but we don't get the concurrent infrastructure improvements that should go along with it. So that's what my concern is, and that sort of rolls into what we're doing with the RAC zones proposed for Canyon Park and Country Village. I mean, that's a logical approach. We have to meet a population target in Snohomish County, and so one way is to just increase the density in existing residential neighborhoods, which is not going to be popular. The other way is to add residential designation where it doesn't exist currently, which would be in the Canyon Park and Country Village areas. And it makes sense in the Canyon Park area because it's also a regional growth center because of as determined by the Puget Sound Regional Council. But what I see in that language is I see that we're accommodating the population capacity, but we're not requiring those infrastructures and amenities to go along with that. So I realize that we're going to be doing a comprehensive plan for that area, much like we did for the downtown area. I would still have a greater comfort level if I saw policy language in those elements that said we are providing for potentially 100 units per acre of residential units or more on property where it was 0. And because we are going to plan for growth in those areas, we're going to require the provision of parks and street improvements. So I see you're itching there, and I just don't see that language there, and I would feel a lot more comfortable if it was there, captured in the comp plan, and that we weren't just relying for it to appear later on.
Okay. So could I respond?
Oh, okay.
We would like to have done the full-blown Canyon Park reimagining as part of this comp plan update. And in such a reimagining, it'd be the complete deal. It'd be like the downtown plan. We didn't have the money to do that, so we're having to do it sequentially. The first step is to demonstrate to PSRC that we are compliant with Vision 2040 and can accommodate that population. The next step is to be much more detailed in terms of the infrastructure to accommodate that growth. Now, hopefully, that reimagining process is no more than a year or two away. But we recognize the need to sync those things up, and we intend to do that in the next couple of years.
Well, I hope the council would support staff proposing some language that for this update that would speak to the provision of infrastructure and amenities, not just the provision of population capacity in those two sub-areas. Because it is a lovely idea to want to do the planning for that area, but if I remember, the downtown master plan process was not only long, it was very expensive. I mean, I thought that was like $100,000 plus planning effort. And so I want to make sure that we have language in the comp plan now concurrent with this new RAC zoning so that it will precede and be there, captured there, prior to the reimagining for that area.
Can you catch me up on where you are on which page?
Can I interject something on that? Because
I'm trying to be kind of more global on
and then
these.
you can jump to where are you on?
Well,
in the first.
I'm trying to skip over the little bits and go to the bigger bits. So now, so that was if you look on the second page, that would have been the second bullet. The second item.
Okay. And do you mind? There's a question.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So I don't understand that last comment. I mean, it sounds like the proposal is that we would change the zoning of Canyon Park to RAC, and you're saying that until we do a planning process like we did for the downtown, that zoning wouldn't be effective?
No. What I'm saying is that what the Planning Commission has recommended is that we apply an RAC zone, so activity center zoning, to the Canyon Park sub-area and Country Village sub-area. And we need to do that to meet the population capacity. And so I agree with that. But what I want to see with that language of the provision of that RAC zone is language that says, essentially, we're planning for this area to accommodate 5,000 people, 5,000 more people. It should, along with that, include infrastructure and amenities like parks and transportation improvements, because there are no parks up there right now, and if we're adding,
as one of two Snohomish County members of this council, I know that there's actually a single ball field in all of Snohomish County, which is an interesting conversation to have when we talk about our overall parks budget and where we're spending money. But I guess my point on this is I don't really understand. I mean, I was a part of the downtown planning process, and I think that was a fantastic process. I think we're seeing the fruits and the results of that. And I don't have any, I mean, I think that's something that we've talked about doing, and I don't know that, I guess I'm not sure. I mean, I'd be interested in seeing what the language is that you would propose to couple with that. and I'm glad that you clarified that you're not saying that that's a precondition for changing the zoning in this.
No,
I guess that was
it's
my
not
question.
a precondition. I want to see it all together. I don't want to see just a package that contains population capacity. I want to see a package that says population capacity, amenities like parks, and transportation improvements for that area, for those areas.
Okay. Quick follow-up question. Where do you believe we do have deficits in regards to parks in our city?
Okay, so in the parks element, they have, there's a great map, and if you look at the map, you can see that there are very few parks in Snohomish County, especially north of 228th.
Okay.
So, and what we're talking about for the Canyon Park area, which is definitely north of 228th, and so it seems like if we're going to provide for growth there, we would also want to provide for if we're going to provide for population growth, also provide for services for that growth.
But I guess, if you'll permit me, I guess the concern that I have is that just saying something in the comp plan doesn't make it so. Parks require money. Parks require either a bond or a change to a budget to increase it to have money. So just saying in the comp plan, we would like to have that. There's many things that exist in our comp plan.
Okay.
And there's many things that we have in our PROSAP. There's things that we have in our capital facilities plan. And I think that that's one of the reasons we had the capital facilities planning process, is because they say, how do we spend money over 7 years? And what do we, long term, when we look at streams of revenue and things that we'd like to do as a city, we get together as the council, different boards and commissions, and the community, and come together and make that decision. I don't disagree with you that having, I would like to see much better transportation and park amenities in the Snohomish County portion of Bothell as well. I just don't know that saying in the comp plan is going to necessarily drive it into the budget, which is really where the rubber meets the road.
And I guess that's a good point that I think where we differ, because what I'm thinking is that when that population capacity, or when that population arrives in that plan and code designation area where they could get potentially 100 units per acre or more, or even higher than that if there is transfer of development rights, we have increased the value of that property. And so in increasing the value of that property, we should be asking for in return amenities like parks, provision of affordable housing, and so that's where we differ in philosophy, I believe. Because I feel that if we're going to take a piece of property where there was zero residential capability today, and then increase that zoning to 100 units per acre or more, and then say, you just have to pay your park impact fees and you've done your part. I think that we should take that opportunity when we increase the intensity to, in return, get amenities for that.
Got a question for you. You mentioned that their RAC could take transfer of development rights, and that would increase its density. How is that possible? Because RAC is only controlled by height and width.
So
you increase density when the box is already the box.
Okay, so we can go to the next point, because I would like to remove the references to transfer of development rights from the comprehensive plan, because I think it is a concept that has not been well developed. Planning Commission and staff both recognize that they would like to spend more time on that. However, it would work, for example, and this is how it was explained to me. So in the proposed RAC zone of Canyon Park, there is a maximum height of 65 feet. So you have a 65-foot height limit. However many units you can fit into that 65-foot height limit with your building limitation. You could, with the transfer of development rights, increase the building height, so say by a floor. And then that would be the capacity where that site could be the receiving site for additional density from wherever it was sent from. So that, I guess, that's the answer to the question that was explained to me by staff. And other than that, I don't really know a lot about TDR. And I think council, the planning commission staff, we haven't had the opportunity to explore that further, and so I would like to remove that language from this update. And removing the language does not preclude having a discussion on it in the future.
Can I say something? Okay, you can. The TDR is an interesting tool and actually can be very much a green tool. And it's actually used, Councilmember Ray, you may know, in the city of Redmond. There's a 15-acre site. Some of the transfer developments rights was sold for more dense development in downtown, where truly I think it should be where the resources are for the roads and sidewalks and sewer. So it can be a great tool to actually preserve the environment, rather than just encourage sprawl potentially.
So I guess I would say that we just had we had a room packed full of people earlier tonight about conserving open space in our community. And if you talk to Forterra and you spend some time in conservation groups, one of the most innovative tools to do that is a transfer of development rights. At this moment in Bothel's history, where we just had people pack a room and say, we really, really, really want to save an open space, to say, I want to strip out all references to one innovative tool to save open space. I can't support that. I think that's something that if we're looking to save land, and actually transfer of development rights is a very innovative concept. It's one that's preserved really precious lands in our state. And I think just saying I don't understand it, so I want to strip it out, especially at this moment in Bothel's history, would be very unfortunate. And I wouldn't. If you're asking for feedback as you go through it, I wouldn't support that.
Do you want the rest of the council to chip in on that as we're going through it? You said you were open to comments.
Yeah, just as long as I get to reiterate that removing the language from this comp plan, and there's extensive language. There's not just a policy in there. There's extensive language in there. Removing it does not preclude a conversation about TDR in the future. Not having it in there doesn't mean that we don't talk about it, and in fact, that's what the Planning Commission has requested, that we docket that for discussion afterwards, or that they continue to discuss that. I just feel uncomfortable that we have an undeveloped idea, that staff has even said that they would like more time to learn about it. I feel uncomfortable having an undeveloped idea in the comprehensive plan. I mean, we have language in here about, my question is, have we even identified sending areas and receiving areas? I mean, there's a lot of unanswered questions about TDR that mean that if the concept isn't well fleshed out, I don't think it should be in the comprehensive plan.
Okay. Does anybody want to chip in on that, or let her continue?
I'd like to keep moving.
Okay. Councilmember Sandberg, how much time more do you think you'll be taking this evening?
Well, I'm more than happy to just leave you with these comments. I have comments about the natural environment element, and we received some comments about adding additional language in, which I would like to do. And let's see here. I think my comments are pretty self-explanatory. So if you guys want to move on to something else and read these, and then we'll come to them next week, that's fine too.
Okay, Councilmember Deputy Mayor Spivey.
I'd like a copy of these of my own. We're sharing copies down here.
Okay. As are we.
I'll make sure to send it to staff, and then you can have it by email.
And then
any other comments?
Mayor, we started with less than an hour and a half for time available for a subject that we booked an hour and a half for. Right. Plus, we have another item. So just being aware of that, of the time.
It sounds like Councilmember Sandberg is at the end of her comments. Does anybody else wish to make comment on this agenda bill this evening? We're not taking public comment at this point. Yes.
So I would like to make comment. I have quite a few, but I really do want to move on to the next agenda item, because we can come back to talk about this more. Maybe we expand how much time we talk about it at the next meeting, the study session. It's just getting late, and I do want to get to our last time-sensitive item on the agenda.
Good. All right, with that, we'll conclude that item for this evening. The next on the agenda is AB 15056, study session to review the 6-year projected budget increase to fire and EMS. Our Chief Bob Van Horn will be making a presentation to us this evening.
Laura, I'm not sure if we've got your password on here anymore. It was under here. Can we close that thing out? This wasn't on. I just put it on the side. So it's gone, huh? Here, let me put it back in.
I have a meeting at 7 a.m.
That's 2013.
Well, should be right there then. Councilmember Agnew.
I'd like to extend the meeting for 15 minutes.
To 10:45?
To 10:45.
10:45.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Councilmember Lamb left and is absent, so his vote is the affirmative. Okay, almost there.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As you remember, we talked about the feasibility study in April during a study session, and you became aware of what the cost of a regional fire authority would be. Staff determined that it would be good as you think through whether you should proceed with a regional fire authority for you to understand what the potential cost of standing alone as a core service of the city for the fire and EMS would be. So this is a 6-year projected increase to the fire and EMS budget. I have about 8 slides here. I understand that we will talk about this on the 12th and then the 19th. So I will respect your time and take as much time or as little time as you would like tonight. Some key numbers to remember is that this is a 6-year study. It goes from 2015 through 2020, 2015 being the first year of our biennial budget. There are annual increases, and these annual increases are fed throughout Attachment 1, which is a master spreadsheet for all 6 years. Finance provided the numbers that they use for forecasting, and they predict that wages will increase an estimate of 3% each year, benefits 8%, and M&O 2%. So as you will see, we found a cell that was in error, and it moved the projected total costs from $15.5 million to $14.5 million. So you have before you the corrected AB, and you have the Attachment 1, which has been corrected. Be aware that $10 million of this is capital, and I'll explain that in a little bit. I'm going to go through each one of the attachments briefly. Attachment 1, again, is an Excel spreadsheet. It starts with 2015, and the first 2 years are the biennial budget that we are currently in. It's a high-level view, and it's divided up amongst the various priorities within the department. Within the 2015-16 budget, there is the approved budget and attachment 1, plus you'll see some unfunded budget priorities, which I'll explain in just a minute. 2017 then begins annual increases to the 2016 base, plus additional M&O. What we ask staff to do is, what would it take for us to become not only meet our needs today, but what would it take to become an exceptional fire department, and what would it cost to do that? And so there's some dramatic increases that make up this $14.5 million. Also in 2017, there's some capital improvements. There's the Nesbitt report in 2009 said that the next fire station that should be built in the south end of the city. So we've included a price for land and construction of a south end fire station, and then we've also added a fire engine and an aid unit to the capital. And then also, if you remember in the council retreat we had this year, you were provided a number of $2.5 million to provide updates to the downtown and Canyon Park fire stations. And at some point, I've got a list of recommended updates for those 2 stations. Then 2018 annual increases are included in 2018, plus to have a new fire station, it requires to hire 12 new people. And we would place 9 firefighters and 3 officers at that station. And then you will see 2017 through 2020, the annual increases plus additional M&O. And in attachment 3, you'll see the detail that makes up the 2017 through 2020 increases. Attachment 2 then is the 2015 and 2016 unfunded budget priorities. Each director was asked when they presented this budget, asked by the finance director, to provide what would it take for you to get back up to pre-recession funding. And so the August 6th memo to the finance director was communicated to the city manager during staff's presentation of our 2015-2016 proposed budget. Items that were not funded in the current biennial budget are additional overtime. We provided a number in there to allow us to get to the 4-year average of what our annual usage of overtime is. It includes equipment, training, meetings, and professional development. So you'll see that in 2015 we documented basically $160,000 of unfunded needs, and in 2016 $158,000. Attachment 3 then is the 2017 through 2020 budget detail. It itemized list of needs, costs, and justification for each one of those needs. Throughout the years, we have eliminated our officer meetings, and that's academic for us because on a 3-shift schedule, we cannot get all our officers together at one time and conduct a meeting, so it requires overtime. So there's costs for that. We eliminated our battalion chiefs, deputy chief meetings. We have stopped purchasing some of the equipment to curb our M&O. And you see in training is embolded there. It is much of the document of 17 through 20 is to get our training back up to a standard that feeds performance. Training is like air to us, like air to the body, training is to performance for firefighters. And so this provides not only mission critical training, but it provides training both in-state and out-of-state. It allows us to maintain our certifications. Also, we've identified that there are, within the 6-year period, there are 24 people, 24 firefighters, who will be 53 years of age or older and eligible for retirement. Out of those 24, we have 11 who will also have 30 years of service within this 6-year period. So we have forecasted replacing 12 individuals within the next 6 years. Annual physicals have also been placed within this needs analysis, and it complies. Firefighters need to go through physicals, and they should be not your standard physical that you go when you go to a doctor. There's specific things that they need to have checked. Chest x-rays, a stress test, things like this, and NFPA 1582 covers that standard. Again, with any needs assessment, there's overtime, and also there is a new cot out that many of the fire departments are moving to help raise the patient up into the back of the aid unit rather than muscling the patient up into the back of the aid unit. So we added funds for that. So you can see between the overtime, maintenance and operation, and capital, the total is $786,000 range. Attachment 4 then is specific to the South End Station. The station cost is about $10 million. It is land at about $1.3 million, construction at $5 million, apparatus, an engine and an aid car, and then continuing M&O. Facility improvements, again, the $2.5 million, and I have a list, again, of things that I can share as to what needs to be improved in both the downtown and Canyon Park fire stations. And then 2018 is $1.8 million, almost 1.9, and that includes the staffing. We build a station, we purchase the land, we build a station in 2017, and then we staff it in 2018. And again, it takes 12 people to provide 3 people around the clock, 24 hours a day, so 3 officers, 9 firefighters. There's a new hire process that is costly to bring the people on, equipment and training. There's also, with new firefighters, there's additional overtime that would be required, and then M&O and asset replacement. So if we look at this chart here, in 2015 our annual budget's about $10.6 million. It's forecasted that in 2020 the budget will rise to $15.3 million, and that's a $4.6 million difference, and that's a 43% increase. You can see the differences for each year. Again, the small difference for 15 and 16, and then the increases along with the bond issue for potential bond issue for 2017. So final remarks. There's no action required this evening. As I heard earlier, you would like to address this again on May 12th, and you do have it on the schedule for May 19th. And at that point, council can discuss the feasibility study, the projected needs document that you have received, and finance can provide a sustainability reserves and levy consideration at either the 12th or the 19th. And then if council would like to provide direction to the planning committee members, the RFA planning committee members and staff, I believe the other fire districts are ready to move on to the planning process. So they're kind of just waiting for us right now. Our next meeting is Thursday night, 6 p.m. North Shore headquarters, and then we have another meeting on May 21st at Woodinville headquarters. This ends my presentation, and I'm willing to answer any questions you might have.
Great, thank you so much. Anyone? Questions?
I have a couple.
Councilmember Lamb and then Councilmember Evans.
Sure, go ahead, Councilmember.
Well, I just want to make sure we get copies of your. I think I only have attachment 1 here. Are the other attachments?
Everything was provided yesterday by the city clerk.
Okay.
And an email went out to the council.
And I just got back in town late this afternoon, so I haven't had a chance to see that. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Lamb.
Does anybody else want to go? Or so, Chief, thank you very much for the presentation. I really appreciate that. I wanted to ask you, in terms of the South Station, we've kind of heard different, like when I looked at the RFA study, it wasn't quite as emphatic, I think, as the Nesbitt study earlier. What's your take on that? Because that's a significant big-ticket item, and to me that seems like kind of a crux of the RFA conversation, is if that is going to be something that we're going to bear as a city, would we do that on our own, or would we do that collectively with surrounding jurisdictions? What's your take on the South Station, its need, and as that area grows, do you think that's something that we need to do, that we should do, or how does this kind of fit into?
Well, let me start with the city's capital facility plan.
And actually, I think our meeting was to 10:30, so I think we need to extend.
We extended it in your absence, and you were an affirmative vote.
I should leave more often. That's good to know.
It's been in the capital facilities plan for a number of years, at least since 2009. When I came, it was unfunded. There was no funding attached to it, $5 million price tag. I contacted an architect probably within the last couple of years. They said $5 million is still a good figure for that. And again, the Nesbitt study indicated that south end is the next area that a fire station should be built. And you're correct, the feasibility study, when they did their station assessment, said, you know, your stations are in pretty good shape, pretty good place. But it did show that south end of Bothell, south end of North Shore, and the southwest area of Woodinville still has a need. And so I would say, as your fire chief, if the council decides to remain a standalone, or if the citizens don't approve an RFA, we need to seriously look at the south end as the next fire station. Yeah.
Okay. And would you say of all the capital needs, because I mean, the situation with fire is kind of unique because our other, police have a very, very high quality capital facility. Other city staff now have a high quality facilities being constructed in the city hall, and our public works also have a facility in the north part of the city, and fire really hasn't had kind of commensurate investment on that. If you were going to take those capital dollars, and it's kind of a spur of the moment question, so if you don't want to answer on the spur of the moment, I respect that. If you're going to take the next capital dollars, if someone said, hey, here's $5 million in capital, would you put that in towards a new south station, or would you put that in sort of refurbishing and remodeling the stations that we have currently?
Both.
Okay. Good answer. Good answer.
Yeah, the South End Station is a need, and the facilities, if you remember in the feasibility study, our facilities, Canyon Park and downtown, were classified in fair condition. And so there are needs. We have our exercise equipment, as an example, in the truck bays of both. And we shouldn't be having our firefighters exercise in the same place where vehicles are driving in and out. Even though we have diesel emission systems, exhaust emission systems, it's just not ideal. So one of the things that I would do is we would plan to create separate rooms. We would add on to the fire stations so that they would have a separate exercise. So that's just an example. There are just a number of needs that need to be taken care of in our existing facilities, and they can last us for quite a few years. And out of the feasibility study, our downtown fire station and our Canyon Park fire station, they didn't move them. They were in ideal locations. So now it's a matter of taking care of them.
Okay. And do you find I know one of the things as a jurisdiction with our police department, when they go out to recruit people, the fact that we have a facility that is really great helps us in recruiting people. Have you found any difficulty when we compete with other people out of Fire Academy for new hires or anything like that, that our physical equipment is causing people to look at another jurisdiction versus us, or am I overthinking that? Is that not really an issue?
I don't think that's an issue for people wanting to have a career in the fire service.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Great. Councilmember Ragland.
So at this point in time, we have no physical exam program for the personnel. They don't have an annual physical or...
The only ones that have the potential are hazmat people, hazardous materials technicians, and at this point it's optional. As the fire chief, I'd like to make them mandatory.
I agree with you. I think they should be mandatory. And I know when my department went and implemented that program, we found 2 firefighters that needed surgery. One had a occlusion of one of his coronary arteries, left anterior descending. It's called a widowmaker. And without that exam, they would have never found that. So I think those are essential for the firefighters.
Well, I digress here, but I'm also a byproduct, a positive impact of department physicals. I don't think I wouldn't have probably gone to a doctor and they found my prostate cancer and were able to take care of it before it went beyond the prostate. And the pathology report afterwards, it was an aggressive form of cancer. So by the time I'd had the symptoms, it could have been too late. So I very much appreciate department physicals. There is a cost to it, but there's a greater cost of going through the medical
Absolutely.
treatment and the loss of an employee.
And I see that in this budget we have a robust training schedule for the first time in a while, and I know that you've done a great job with the finances that have been limited. It'll be nice to get the people back up. I totally agree with you that training is essential for firefighters. I mean, they don't get that many fires. They have to train for them. EMS calls 80% of what we do, and they train for that constantly also. So I was appreciative of that coming in. Those are the only two comments I had at this point in time.
Councilmember Sandberg.
Thank you for the presentation. So a lot of your presentation revolves around the siting of a new South End station. So is that something that the RFA would do if, for example, the RFA was formed? I didn't get that in the report, so I'm wondering. I see that you are stating it as a need, but the RFA ESCI report didn't state it as a need. So if the RFA is formed, can members of the RFA anticipate that there will be the capital needs of building a South End station sometime in the future?
They could do that, but you're correct, it's not in the report. It's not in the feasibility study right now. So there is no South End fire station to help serve the areas of Woodinville, Bothell, and North Shore.
And then if we were to build, if we were not to become join an RFA, but if we were to maintain our department as is, if we were to build a South End fire station, would we consider like a joint agreement or joint funding agreement with Kirkland, because they seem to have a need for fire services in their North End, which is our South End, and so would there be a means for cost sharing?
Those are always great options to pursue.
Uh-huh. And then, so does a new? I'm always I read the study, and it showed that the majority of the calls are EMS calls, and I thought they were something like 97%, or only 2.5% are fire, and then there's a significant portion that are EMS.
It's usually in the 70 to 80% range. Woodinville was an anomaly; they were down in the 60% range.
And so, if you were to build a new South End fire station, do you build fire stations that are geared just towards the provision of EMS services? It seems like that would be maybe a smaller footprint, and yet you still are providing the services that are needed 80 to 85% of the time?
Yeah. There is a thought out there that people could build just an EMS station to handle the aid calls. The problem that I have as a fire chief is I never know when 911 goes off what we're going to be dispatched to. And you can provide both aid and fire service off of a fire engine, and I did it for many years for the city of Renton. We responded to both aid calls and fire calls. And as your fire chief, I would encourage us to, this council, the city, to have both the ability to respond to fire and aid calls. Fires are very unforgiving. The time curve, especially with the new construction, the glues, the resins, fires spread rapidly. And so it's necessary we have a fire resource fairly close, because the time temperature curve goes up dramatically as time goes by. Yeah. So I would always support being able to provide both services, both EMS and fire, out of a facility. And that's what we currently do with our Canyon Park and the district-owned station at Station 44 up at Queensboro. We're able to provide both a fire and EMS response with just 3 people.
But is an EMS centric station only? Is that the same amount of personnel? I mean, it seems like it would be less equipment, less capital outlay, but is it the same amount of personnel or less personnel?
It would be 8 people, 8 personnel.
Should we extend the meeting?
Nope.
No? Okay. Councilmember Ram? Okay, anyone else? Deputy Mayor Spivey?
Great, thank you. Well, like Councilmember Agnew, I was pretty excited to see the training budget and the medical exams, things that we definitely need, as well as the improvements to the existing stations. I think that, excuse me, if we're thinking about doing some sort of partnership on the south end, that's really going to take the RFA to do that. Otherwise, we're going to be on our own for that station. That's just my gut feeling. I have nothing to say one way or the other. But it's just looking at the numbers just proves how 1% per year doesn't keep up with just even our fire department. That was about a 13% increase when you added everything up per year. So there's definitely a need, and thank you for all the hard work on this, and we'll do our best to get you the resources so you can move forward.
Great. Councilmember Evans.
Just quickly on the South Station, when we looked at our station study, the difference, the level of service response time was a little bit more for the south end calls than it was for the rest of our calls. I don't remember that being a significant amount of additional time, but I don't have those numbers. We can get those out of the study and take a look at those. But I guess I see the need for a station, but on the other hand, I don't know that our level of service is so out of whack for that south end that it has to come right now. But again, I'd need to look at those stations studies. And the last question I have: when will we at the next meeting see the financial breakdown of these costs and what it means to the taxpayer and that type of thing as far as the financial side of this?
I can't speak for finance. By the 19th, though, they would be able to do that. I don't know if they'd have it ready for the 12th.
Yeah, I think that's the key piece of info, in addition to all of this that we're looking for and the public's looking for. So hopefully no later than the 19th. By the 19th, and that would be great. So, okay, thank you.
One last 5 second.
Do we as a city spend more or less on average, like per 1,000 residents, than other jurisdictions around us for fire? And if you don't know the answer, we can...
It's a great question. Working with Woodinville, I know that their budget is more than ours,
okay.
But also within our budget is an HR department and finance, and which they have to provide. So I don't know if I could compare apples to apples.
Okay, fair enough.
Because Woodinville and Bothell have virtually the same workforce, and they're in about the
starting at the top.
They're in about the $12 million range. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Chief.
Bob, it was so great. Recently, we had a meeting of 36 community leaders a few weeks ago that came together to talk about how collectively we could serve the city. And there was overwhelming comments that followed that in my conversations with those leaders about you and your leadership and your heart for people. So since we have a public chance, you are a great man. Thank you so much for your leadership here in the city. And that was said for all our city staff that came, all 5 of you. People were thoroughly impressed with the caliber of leadership that we have in the city. So thank you so much. All right. Thank you for the presentation this evening. We have 2 minutes left. Anything from our city manager? Anything else for the good of the cause?
Move to adjourn.
All in favor, or any discussion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed? So we are adjourned.